Hello, friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The call came through on a Tuesday morning in early April. I'd been sitting in a Waffle House off I-75 near Ocala, nursing my third cup of coffee and watching the news coverage of Hurricane Bethany's aftermath. The storm had torn through the Panhandle 3 days earlier, leaving a trail of destruction from Panama City to Apalachicola. Category 4 at landfall, they said. Whole communities wiped off the map. My name's Bo. Been driving trucks for 17 years. Mostly Florida routes. I know every stretch of asphalt from Pensacola to Key West, every way station, every speed trap, every decent place to grab a meal at 3 in the morning. The humidity doesn't bother me anymore. The afternoon thunderstorms are just part of the rhythm. Even hurricane season doesn't faze me much. You learn to work around it, plan your routes, keep an ear on the weather radio. But this call was different. Bo, I got something special for you, Ruby said. She'd been my dispatcher at Sunshine State Logistics for the past 6 years. Good woman, never steered me wrong. FEMA contract, relief supplies heading to Franklin County. They need someone who knows the back roads, someone reliable. How bad is it up there? I asked, already knowing I'd take the job. Bad. Real bad. Most of the main roads are still blocked. You'll have to take State Road 65 through Tate's Hell, then cut over on some county roads. GPS probably won't help much. A lot of the landmarks are gone. Tate's Hell State Forest. 700 square miles of pine flatwoods, cypress swamps, and black water creeks. Named after a farmer named C.B. Tate, who got lost in there back in 1875, supposedly wandered for a week after being bitten by a snake. When they finally found him, all he could say was, "My name is Sebe Tate, and I just came from hell." Then he died. Cheerful place. What's the cargo? I asked. Medical supplies, water, MREs, the basics. Drop point is the emergency shelter they set up in Carabel. Should be straightforward, in and out. Should be. In 17 years, I'd learned those 2 words usually meant trouble. I finished my eggs, paid my check, and headed to the depot. The trailer was already loaded and sealed when I arrived. Standard 53-footer, heavy but not overweight. I did my pre-trip inspection while Ruby handled the paperwork. Tires looked good, lights worked, 5th wheel was solid, everything checked out. The drive up I-75 to I-10 was smooth enough. Traffic was lighter than usual. Most folks were heading away from the disaster zone, not toward it. The sky was that peculiar shade of blue you only see in Florida after a major storm passes through, like all the moisture had been wrung out of the air. But as I turned north onto State Road 20, things started to change. The first sign was the trees. Some were snapped clean in half, their pale innards exposed like broken bones. Others were stripped naked, every leaf torn away, standing like skeletal sentinels along the roadside. Power lines dangled like party streamers. Every few miles I'd pass a house with its roof peeled back like a sardine can, pink insulation scattered across the yard like cotton candy. By the time I reached State Road 65, the sun was getting low, painting everything in shades of orange and red. This was where the real damage started. The road was technically clear. The state crews had been through with chainsaws and bulldozers, but debris lined both sides in walls 10 feet high. Broken lumber, twisted metal, entire trees with their root balls still attached. It was like driving through a canyon made of destruction. I slowed to about 35, picking my way around patches where the asphalt had buckled from the storm surge. The road was elevated here, built on a berm to keep it above the swamp, but Bethany had pushed water places it had never been before. I could see the high water marks on the tree trunks, 6, maybe 7 feet up. The smell hit me even through the closed windows. Rot, mildew, and something else. Something organic and wrong. The turnoff to County Road 318 came up faster than expected. The street sign was gone, naturally, but I recognized the spot by the old concrete bridge abutment. This was the shortcut Ruby had told me about, a narrow 2-lane that would save me 20 miles versus staying on 65. It ran through the heart of Tate's hell, but it should be passable. The moment I turned onto 318, everything changed. The debris walls disappeared, replaced by dense forest that pressed in from both sides. The storm had been through here, too. I could see damaged trees and standing water in the ditches. But it was different, quieter. The sunset barely penetrated the canopy, leaving everything in a green-tinted twilight. I clicked on my headlights and kept rolling. The road was rough but intact, though I had to weave around the occasional fallen branch. My GPS showed nothing but a gray void. No roads, no landmarks, just blank space. I was navigating by memory and instinct now, counting the turns, watching for the markers I knew. That's when I saw the first person. He was standing on the shoulder about 50 yards ahead, barely visible in the gathering darkness. An older man, maybe 60, wearing what looked like overalls and a flannel shirt. He wasn't trying to flag me down, wasn't even looking at me. Just standing there, facing the swamp. I slowed as I passed him, got a better look. His clothes were soaked, clinging to him like he'd been swimming. His feet were bare, covered in mud up to his ankles. But it was his face that made me hit the brakes. He was smiling, not a normal smile, not relief at seeing another human being. This was something else, too wide, showing too many teeth, the kind of smile that belongs on a mask, not a face. I stopped about 30 feet past him, watching in my mirrors. He hadn't moved, hadn't turned to follow my progress. Just stood there, smiling at nothing. My first instinct was to help. That's what you do after a hurricane. You help people. But something held me back. Maybe it was the smile. Maybe it was the way he stood so perfectly still. Maybe it was just 17 years of road intuition telling me something was off. I put the truck in gear and started rolling again. In my mirror, I saw him turn his head to watch me go, that smile never wavering. A half-mile later, I saw another one. A woman this time, younger, maybe 30. Same position, standing on the shoulder, facing the swamp, soaking wet despite the fact it hadn't rained in days. Same bare feet, same smile, then another, and another. Over the next 5 miles, I counted 12 people, all standing along the road at irregular intervals, all soaking wet, all barefoot, all smiling that same too-wide smile. None of them moved as I passed. None tried to flag me down. None even acknowledged my presence, except to turn their heads and watch me go. My hands were gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make my knuckles white. This wasn't normal. This wasn't hurricane shock or trauma. This was something else. The road curved ahead, following the edge of a cypress swamp. In my headlights, I could see the water, black as oil, perfectly still. The trees rose out of it like pillars, their knees and roots creating a landscape of shadows and reflections. Spanish moss hung in curtains, swaying slightly despite the absence of any wind. That's when I saw the roadblock. 3 cars were positioned across the road, nose to tail, completely blocking both lanes. They looked abandoned. No lights, no movement. But as I slowed to a stop about 50 feet away, people emerged from behind them. 6 of them, all matching the others I'd seen. Wet clothes, bare feet, those horrible smiles. But these ones were moving, walking toward my truck with a strange, synchronized gait, like they were all hearing the same rhythm. I threw the truck in reverse, but before I could move, more people emerged from the forest behind me. A dozen, maybe more, forming a line across the road. I was boxed in. They kept coming, slowly, steadily. Not rushing, not aggressive, just walking with that same measured pace, all of them smiling. I reached for my phone. No signal. Of course. The CB radio crackled to life, making me jump. Static at first, then a voice, distorted and hollow. "Welcome, Bo. We've been waiting." I hadn't told anyone my name on the radio. The paperwork was sealed in the trailer. There was no way they could know who I was, unless they'd been waiting specifically for me. The closest one reached my door, pressed his face against the window. His eyes were wrong, clouded, like a dead fish's eyes, but somehow still seeing. Water dripped from his hair, ran down the glass. He mouthed words I couldn't hear over the engine. Then he knocked. 3 times. Slow, deliberate. The others had surrounded the truck now, at least 20 of them. All pressing close, all smiling, all soaking wet. The smell was overwhelming even through the sealed cab. Stagnant water, decay, something chemical and sharp. One of them climbed onto the step, brought his face level with mine. It was an older man, maybe the first one I'd seen. This close, I could see his skin was wrong, pruned like he'd been in water for days, but also something else. Patches of it were translucent, showing dark veins underneath. His smile stretched wider, impossible wide, the corners of his mouth nearly reaching his ears. He spoke, his voice muffled through the glass, but clear enough. "Clyde says you need to come with us. The shelter's waiting." Clyde. I didn't know any Clyde, but the way he said it, like Clyde was someone important, someone I should know, sent ice through my veins. More hands on the truck now, pressing against the doors, the hood, the windows. The whole cab was rocking slightly. They weren't trying to break in, not yet. They were just touching, feeling, like they were trying to understand what the truck was. The CB crackled again. "Don't make this difficult, Bo. You have supplies we need. The people at the shelter are hungry. So hungry." The emphasis on that last word was wrong. Hungry for what? I had 2 options. Try to ram through the roadblock ahead, or reverse through the crowd behind. Either way, I'd hit people. Either way, I'd have to live with that. But looking at those faces, those smiles, those dead fish eyes, I wasn't sure these were people anymore. I made my decision. Slamming the truck into first, I gunned it toward the roadblock. The crowd scattered, moving with that same synchronized motion, like a school of fish. But they didn't run. They just stepped aside, creating a narrow channel barely wide enough for my truck. I hit the first car at about 20 miles per hour, pushing it aside with a grinding screech of metal. The second car spun away. The third crumpled against my bumper but moved enough to let me through. Behind me, I heard them laughing. All of them, in perfect unison, a sound like water gurgling down a drain. The road ahead was clear, but my mirrors showed them following. Not running, just walking with that same steady pace. But somehow, keeping up, always just at the edge of my taillight's reach. The engine coughed. The speedometer dropped from 45 to 40, then 35. The truck was struggling, like something was dragging it back. I pressed harder on the accelerator, but the speed kept dropping. 30. 25. 20. In the mirrors, they were getting closer. That's when I saw the water on the road ahead. It started as puddles, grew to streams, then a solid sheet of black water covering the asphalt. The storm surge must have pushed inland further than anyone realized. The road was flooded. I had no choice but to push through. The water hit my bumper with a splash, rose up around the wheels. The truck slowed more, fighting against the resistance. 15:10. The engine was screaming, but we were barely moving. The water was rising, already up to the bottom of the doors. This didn't make sense. The road was elevated. The water should be running off, not pooling, unless something was holding it here, or someone. In my mirrors, I saw them entering the water behind me, They didn't slow down. If anything, they moved faster, more naturally, like the water was their element. Some of them went under completely, and I could see shapes moving beneath the surface, keeping pace with the truck. The engine coughed again, died for a second, caught. Water was coming in somewhere. I could hear it sloshing. The cab started to smell like the swamp, thick and organic. Then I saw her in the headlights. A woman, standing in the middle of the flooded road, but not like the others. This one was different. Dry clothes. A simple dress that might have been white once but was now stained with mud and something darker. Long gray hair that moved like it was underwater despite being dry. And her face. She had no eyes, just smooth skin where they should be. But she was looking right at me anyway. She raised one hand, and the truck stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. The engine was still running, wheels still turning, but we weren't moving, like the water had turned to concrete around us. She walked toward the truck, each step sending ripples across the water that seemed to move in the wrong direction. Behind me, the others had caught up, surrounding the truck again, but they stayed back, like they were afraid of her. She came to my window, placed a hand on the glass. Where she touched, frost spread in delicate patterns despite the humid Florida night. "You're carrying supplies," she said, and her voice came through the glass like it wasn't there. "But not the kind they told you about." I found my voice somehow. "I'm just delivering emergency supplies. FEMA contracted us. People need..." "People?" She tilted her head. "Is that what Clyde told you we were? People?" "I don't know any Clyde." "No, but he knows you. He's been knowing you since you started driving these roads. Every time you passed through, he watched. He waited. And when the storm came, when it washed away the barriers between what was and what shouldn't be, he called us up, called us home." The others were pressing closer now, their faces eager, hungry. The woman, I somehow knew her name was Norma, though she'd never said it, turned to look at them. "Patience," she said. "He's not for eating. Not yet. Clyde has plans." Plans. The word echoed in my head. I needed to get out of here. The water around my truck had gone completely still. Not calm, still, like glass, like time had stopped. The headlights reflected off it in perfect symmetry, creating a tunnel of light that seemed to go down forever. The engine was running, but the temperature gauge was climbing. Whatever was holding us in place was putting strain on the entire system. Norma still had her hand on my window, frost spreading from her touch in increasingly complex patterns. The others, maybe 30 of them now, stood in a perfect circle around the truck, waist deep in the black water, their faces all turned up toward me, all smiling. "You need to understand," Norma said, her voice coming through like we were having a normal conversation. "The hurricane didn't just destroy things. It revealed them, washed away the thin places between your world and ours. Clyde's been waiting so long for this chance." "What do you want?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt like sandpaper. "Want?" She tilted her head, and I heard her neck crack like breaking twigs. "We don't want anything. We are wanted, called, summoned by need. The shelter needs supplies. The people need food. You need to make your delivery. Everyone needs something, Bo. That's how Clyde works." The CB crackled. 5 miles, Bo. Just 5 more miles to the shelter. Think of all those hungry people waiting." 5 miles. Through this. Through them. "I'll make you a deal," Norma said. "We'll clear the road. Let you pass. You can make your delivery. Be a hero. All we ask is that you stop at the shelter, just for a moment. Let us thank you properly." Every instinct I had screamed no, but the engine was overheating. The water wasn't draining.
and they had me completely surrounded. Maybe if I could get to the shelter, there would be other people there. Real people. Help. Fine, I said. Norma smiled. Not the too wide smile of the others, but something worse. Something that looked almost human but wasn't quite right. Like an AI trying to generate happiness. She stepped back, removing her hand from the window. The frost immediately began to melt, running down in rivulets that looked disturbingly like tears. She raised both arms, and the water began to recede, pulling back from the road like it was being vacuumed away. The others moved with it, walking backward into the forest, their eyes never leaving me. The truck lurched forward as whatever was holding it released. I grabbed the wheel, kept it steady. The temperature gauge started dropping back toward normal. In my mirrors, I could see the road behind me was dry, like the flood had never happened. But they were still there. I could feel them in the darkness between the trees, keeping pace, watching. The 5 miles felt like 50. Every shadow could hide one of them. Every reflection in standing water looked like eyes. The CB stayed silent except for occasional bursts of static that sounded almost like breathing. Then I saw lights ahead. Actual electric lights. Not the bioluminescent weirdness I'd half expected. A building materialized out of the darkness. A large metal structure, like an airplane hangar, with emergency shelter painted on the side in red letters. Floodlights on poles illuminated a parking area full of cars, trucks, even a few RVs. It looked so normal, so real, that I almost cried with relief. I pulled into the lot, found a space big enough for the rig. There were people here. Real people, moving between the vehicles, carrying boxes, helping each other. A woman was handing out water bottles from the back of a pickup. A man was grilling hot dogs on a portable barbecue. Kids were playing on a makeshift playground someone had built from salvaged lumber. This was what I'd expected to find. This was normal. I killed the engine, grabbed the paperwork from the dash, and climbed out. The humid night air hit me like a wall after the air-conditioned cab, but it smelled right. Generator exhaust, cooking food, bug spray, human smells. A man approached me, middle-aged, wearing a FEMA vest over a polo shirt. His badge said, "Shelter Coordinator." "You the supply truck?" he asked, and his voice was beautifully normal. Tired, stressed, but normal. "Yeah, got a full load. Where do you want it?" He pointed to a loading dock on the side of the building. "Back it in there. We'll get some folks to help unload. Thank God you made it. We're running low on everything." I climbed back in the truck, started maneuvering toward the dock. Everything felt so normal that I almost convinced myself the stuff on the road had been hallucinations. Stress, exhaustion, maybe some swamp gas causing hallucinations. It happened. But as I was backing up, using my mirrors to line up with the dock, I saw him. Clyde. He was standing at the edge of the floodlight's reach, half in shadow. Tall, thin, wearing what might have been a suit once, but was now just rags held together by mud and something that might have been seaweed. His face was turned toward me, but I couldn't make out features. Just the suggestion of eyes, a mouth, the basic shape of humanity without any of the details that made it real. He raised one hand in a wave, slow, deliberate, almost mocking. Then he walked into the shelter through the main entrance, and nobody stopped him. Nobody even looked at him. I finished backing in, set the brakes, killed the engine. My hands were shaking as I climbed out. The shelter coordinator was there with a crew of volunteers, all normal-looking people in normal clothes. They had the trailer open before I could warn them. "Excellent," the coordinator said, checking his clipboard. "Medical supplies, water, MREs. Wait, what's this?" He was pointing at something in the back of the trailer. I came around to look. There were other boxes back there. Ones I hadn't seen during my pre-trip. They were older, water-damaged, with no labels or markings. One had broken open, revealing its contents.
Mason jars, dozens of them, filled with murky liquid. Things floated in them, organic shapes I didn't want to identify. The smell that wafted out was familiar. Swamp water, decay, that chemical sharp smell I'd noticed on the wet people. "These aren't on the manifest," the coordinator said, frowning. "I don't know anything about those," I said quickly. "They weren't supposed to be there." He picked up one of the jars, held it to the light. Something inside moved, not floated, moved, swam, pressed against the glass with what might have been a tiny hand. "Interesting," he said, and his voice had changed, gotten deeper, wetter. "These are exactly what we needed." I looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes had clouded over, that dead fish look I'd seen before. Water was seeping through his clothes from the inside, darkening the fabric. His professional smile was stretching wider. All around me, the volunteers were changing. Their movements became synchronized. Their heads all turned toward me at the exact same moment. Water began pooling at their feet despite the clear night. "You did well, Bo," the coordinator said, though his voice was now coming from everywhere at once. "The regular supplies will feed the body. But these—" He held up the jar. "These feed the transformation. Soon, everyone in the shelter will be like us. Then the next shelter, then the next town. The hurricane opened the door, but you, Bo, you brought the key." I ran, dropped everything and ran for the truck, but the cab door wouldn't open. The handle was ice cold, frozen solid. I could see frost spreading across the inside of the windshield. "No leaving yet," Norma's voice said behind me. "Clyde wants to thank you personally." I turned. She was there, along with all the others from the road. They'd been here all along, hidden among the real people. Or maybe there had never been real people at all. The whole shelter could be a facade, a trap, a lure. They parted, creating a pathway toward the shelter entrance. At the end of it stood Clyde, now fully visible in the floodlights. His face was a constantly shifting mass of features, like he couldn't decide what he wanted to look like. One moment he had my father's eyes, the next my first girlfriend's smile, then features I didn't recognize but that still felt familiar, pulled from memories I didn't know I had. 17 years, Clyde said, his voice like water running over stones. 17 years you've driven these roads, through my territory, past my places, and never once did you stop to pay respect. Never once did you acknowledge what lived in the spaces between your destinations. I didn't know, I said. I never saw, because the barriers held, because the old agreement stood. But the hurricane changed that, washed away the boundaries, mixed the waters, and now we're free to collect what's owed. I don't owe you anything. He laughed, and it sounded like a drain backing up. Every mile driven through our domain is a debt. Every safe passage, a loan. And now it's time to pay. But I'm not unreasonable. You brought the jars. You helped us spread. So I'll give you a choice. He gestured to the shelter. Through the open door, I could see people inside. Real people, families, children. They were sitting at tables, eating from paper plates, unaware of what was happening outside, unaware of what was about to happen to them. "Join us willingly," Clyde said, "and I'll let them leave. All of them. They can walk out right now, get in their cars, drive away. The supplies you brought will keep them fed on the road. They'll never know how close they came. And if I don't?" His features shifted into something cruel. "Then you watch as every one of them drinks from the jars. Watch as they transform. Watch as they become ours. And then you join us anyway, but with all those souls on your conscience." "That's not a choice?" "It's the only choice you've ever had, Bo. The only choice anyone has. Save others or save yourself. But either way, the house wins. Either way, we feed." I looked at the shelter, at the families inside. A little girl was coloring at one of the tables. A baby was crying in its mother's arms. An elderly couple was sharing a can of peaches. They were hurricane survivors, people who'd lost everything, come here for help. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" I asked. Clyde's face settled into something that looked almost like my own reflection. "Because I need you to choose. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. The willing sacrifice has power. It opens more doors, spreads the influence further. If I just take you, I get one soul. If you choose, I get permission. And permission, Bo, permission is everything." The wet people were closing in slowly. I could hear water dripping from their clothes, their hair, their skin. The smell was overwhelming, organic rot mixed with something chemical, like formaldehyde and swamp gas. "Decide," Norma said softly. "The jars are getting warm. Soon they'll open on their own." I could see it happening. The lids on the jars were bubbling, pressure building inside. Whatever was in there wanted out. Once released, there would be no stopping it. "If I agree," I said slowly, "they all go free? All of them?" "Every last one," Clyde promised. "They drive away and never remember this place. The shelter becomes a bad dream. The supplies get delivered to a real shelter, one that actually helps people. Your sacrifice ensures their salvation." My truck keys were in my pocket. I pulled them out, looked at them. 17 years of driving, 17 years of freedom, of the open road, of being my own boss. It was ending here, in a flooded parking lot in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by things that shouldn't exist. But those people in the shelter didn't deserve this. They'd already survived one disaster. They shouldn't have to face another. "I need to call someone first," I said. "My dispatcher. Tell her the delivery was made." Clyde tilted his head. "No tricks." "No tricks. I need to close that loop. Complete the job. You understand completion, don't you?" He smiled with my mother's mouth. "Make your call." I pulled out my phone. Miraculously, I had signal. I dialed Ruby's number. It rang once, twice, then her voice. "Bo? Jesus, where are you? The GPS shows you stopped moving an hour ago." "Delivery's complete," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Shelter received everything." "Good. Good. Are you heading back?" I looked at Clyde. His face was shifting faster now, impatient. "No," I said. "I'm going to stay and help out for a while. They need volunteers." "That's not like you, Bo." "Yeah, well, maybe it's time for a change." I paused. "Ruby, if anyone asks, the delivery was normal. Nothing unusual, just another hurricane relief run." "Bo, are you okay? You sound..." "I'm fine, just tired. I'll check in later." I hung up before she could respond. Clyde nodded approvingly. "Smart," he said. "No loose ends, no one coming to look for you. You understand how this works." I put the phone away. "Let them go first. I want to see them leave." Clyde gestured to Norma. She walked to the shelter entrance, stood there for a moment, then whispered something I couldn't hear. Inside, people started standing up, gathering their things, moving toward the exits. They moved naturally, not with the synchronized weirdness of the wet people. They looked confused, but not frightened. Within minutes, they were filing out to their vehicles. The mother with the baby, the elderly couple, the little girl with her coloring book. They got in their cars, started engines, began pulling out of the lot. None of them looked at us. It was like we didn't exist for them anymore. I watched until the last taillight disappeared down the road. The shelter stood empty now, just a big metal building full of abandoned supplies and echoing silence. "Your turn," Clyde said. The wet people pressed closer. Their hands reached out, cold and damp, touching my arms, my shoulders, my face. Wherever they touched, I felt the warmth leaving my body, replaced by something else, something cold and ancient and patient. The transformation didn't happen all at once. It started in my fingers, a numbness that crept up my arms like I was being slowly submerged in ice water. But it wasn't cold, exactly. It was the absence of temperature, the absence of feeling, like those parts of me were being erased from existence. "Don't fight it," Norma whispered, her breath smelling of stagnant water and decay. "Fighting makes it worse, makes you remember what you're losing." But I couldn't help remembering. 17 years of sunrises through the windshield. The particular vibration of my truck's engine that told me I was home. The taste of terrible truck stop coffee at 3 in the morning. Ruby's laugh when I'd call in with another weird story from the road. All of it was fading, becoming distant, like memories from someone else's life. The wet people were humming now, a low vibration that seemed to come from the water itself. It resonated in my bones, in the spaces between my thoughts. Clyde stood in front of me, his face finally settling into something stable, an average face, forgettable, the kind you'd pass 1,000 times and never remember. "You want to know the truth about Tate's hell?" he asked, his voice conversational now, like we were old friends catching up. CB Tate didn't get lost. He found something, found us. We offered him the same choice we offered you, but he was selfish. Chose to save himself, let his whole family pay the price instead. That's why he could only say he'd been to hell when they found him, because hell is living with that choice. My legs were going numb now. I looked down and saw water pooling around my feet, but it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from me, seeping out through my pores, my clothes darkening with it. "But you," Clyde continued, "you chose different, chose to save strangers. That makes you special, makes you useful. The willing sacrifice, the hero. That story has power. People will tell it. Truckers will share it at stops." "Did you hear about Bo? Disappeared delivering hurricane supplies. Some say he's still out there, driving the back roads, helping people in need. And every time they tell it, we get a little stronger. Every time someone believes it, another door opens." I tried to speak, but water filled my mouth, not choking me, just replacing what was there. My words came out garbled, bubbling. "Shh," Norma said, stroking my hair with fingers that felt like seaweed. "You don't need words anymore. We speak in currents now, in tides, in the spaces between raindrops." The transformation accelerated. My skin was changing, becoming translucent in patches. I could see my veins darkening, filling with something that wasn't blood. My clothes were soaked through, clinging to me, but I didn't feel wet. I felt like I was becoming the water. That's when I heard the engine. Another truck was pulling into the lot. A big rig, just like mine, but newer. The driver was young, maybe mid-20s, wearing a baseball cap and a worried expression. He parked next to my truck, climbed out, looked around. "Hello?" he called. "Anyone here? Dispatch sent me to check on a driver named Bo. Said he hadn't checked in." Ruby. She'd sent someone after all. Clyde's expression darkened. This wasn't part of the deal. "I didn't know," I tried to say, but only bubbles came out. The young driver was walking toward us now, but his steps were slowing. His eyes were widening. He could see us, all of us. The wet people, Clyde, me half transformed. We must have looked like something out of a nightmare. "What the hell?" he started, then turned to run. The wet people moved as one, flowing around him like water around a stone. He made it 3 steps before they had him surrounded. He pulled out a knife, a little folding blade truckers carry for cutting straps and opening boxes. might as well have been a toothpick. "Let him go," I managed to gurgle. "He's not part of this." Clyde turned to me, his average face showing something like amusement. "But he is now. He's seen us. He knows. Can't have him running back to tell stories. Not the wrong kind of stories, anyway." The driver was trying to fight, slashing with his knife, but the wet people just reformed around the blade like water. One of them, a young woman who might have been pretty once, touched his face, and he screamed. Where her fingers made contact, his skin immediately pruned, aged like he'd been underwater for days. "Stop," I said, and somehow my voice was stronger. The transformation had paused. I could feel it, hovering at the edge of completion, waiting. "You want stories? Let him go and you'll have the best story. A witness. Someone who saw what happened to me. Someone who can tell it right." Clyde considered this. "Interesting. But witnesses can be problematic. They bring investigators, questions, attention we don't want." "Not if you do it right," I said, the words coming clearer now. "Not if he only remembers parts. The scary parts. The impossible parts. The parts nobody will believe. He becomes another storyteller, another voice spreading the legend. Every truck stop from here to California will hear about the driver who saw Bo taken by the swamp things. And some will laugh, but some will wonder, and some will come looking." "And find us," Norma said, understanding. "Find more volunteers for the collection." The young driver was on his knees now, surrounded but not touched. His eyes were wild, darting between us, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "What's your name?" I asked him. Tommy," he stammered. "Tommy Richardson." "Tommy, you're going to leave here. You're going to drive away and never come back. But first, you're going to watch. You're going to see what happens. And you're going to remember just enough to tell the story, but not enough to prove it. Do you understand?" He nodded frantically. Clyde smiled. "You're learning, Bo. Learning how the game really works. Very well. The boy can go. After I completed the transformation. After I became one of them fully. I felt it resume, the change. My bones were dissolving, reforming into something more flexible, more fluid. My eyes were changing, the world taking on new colors. Or maybe old colors I'd never been able to see before. I could sense the water table beneath us, feel every drop of moisture in the air, taste the storm systems building 3 states away. But worse than the physical change was the mental one. My memories were being edited, revised. The worst parts were being emphasized, the good parts fading. Every moment of loneliness on the road became magnified. Every relationship that didn't work out became a betrayal. Every small frustration became a reason for revenge. They were turning me into something bitter, something that would enjoy recruiting others to share the misery. "No," I said, or thought, or felt. "That's not who I am." "It's who you're becoming," Clyde replied, and now I could hear him without words, his thoughts flowing directly into mine like water finding its level. "We all resist at first. We all try to hold on to the better parts. But water always finds the path of least resistance. And resistance to misery is very hard to maintain." He was right. I could feel my resolve weakening. What was the point of fighting? I'd already sacrificed myself. Why not embrace it? Why not become the monster they needed me to be? Then I remembered something. A stupid thing, really. A sticker on my truck's dashboard. My niece had put it there years ago when she was 5. A cartoon sunshine with a smiley face and the words, "Uncle Bo is my sunshine." I'd never removed it, even when it got faded and the edges started peeling. It was still there, in my truck,
just 50 feet away. That memory, small as it was, became an anchor. I held on to it, used it to remember other things, teaching my niece to honk the air horn, her laughter when I'd lift her up to sit in the driver's seat, the way she'd wave at me from her window whenever I'd drive by her house. I had people who'd miss me. Maybe not many, but some. And they deserved better than to have me become a monster that might one day come for them. "I accept the transformation," I said, loud enough for Tommy to hear. "But I keep my memories, all of them, good and bad. That's my condition." Clyde's presence in my mind recoiled. "That's not how it works." "Then make it work. You need me willing. I'm willing. But I keep who I am." "You'll suffer more that way. Remembering what you were, what you had. It's crueler. Maybe. But it's mine." There was a long pause. The wet people had stopped their humming. Even the insects had gone quiet. The whole swamp seemed to be holding its breath. "Fine," Clyde said finally. "Keep your precious memories. See how long they last when you're spending eternity in the spaces between. When everyone you knew is dead and forgotten, and you're still here, still serving, still recruiting, we'll see how precious those memories are then." The transformation completed with a sensation like drowning in reverse. I felt my last human breath leave me, replaced by something else. Not air, not water, but the potential for both. I could feel every drop of water for miles around, every stream, every pond, every glass of water in every abandoned house. I was connected to it all. I looked at my hands. They looked normal from a distance, but up close I could see through the skin to the dark currents beneath. I touched my face and felt features that weren't quite right, like a sculpture made from memory rather than observation. "Tommy," I said, and my voice sounded almost normal if you didn't listen too closely. "Get in your truck. Drive away. Tell them Bo made his delivery but decided to stay and help with the cleanup. Tell them the roads are worse than expected, that it might be weeks before they're passable. Tell them." I paused, trying to think of what would keep people away. "Tell them you saw me walking into the swamp with some locals who said they knew a family that needed help. Tell them I said I'd catch a ride back with another trucker when I was done." Tommy nodded, scrambling to his feet. He backed away slowly, then ran for his truck. The engine started immediately. Clyde wasn't holding him. He pulled out fast, tires spinning on the wet asphalt, and disappeared down the road. "And now?" I asked Clyde. "Now you learn what you've become, what you can do, how to call others, how to open doors, how to spread the water's influence." He turned toward the shelter. "But first, we feed." The jars in my trailer were heating up on their own now, the lids popping one by one. The things inside crawled out. Not quite plant, not quite animal, not quite anything that had a name. They scattered into the night, heading for populated areas, looking for hosts. "Each one will find someone," Norma explained. "Someone vulnerable, someone isolated, someone whose disappearance won't be noticed immediately. They'll change them, like we changed you, but slower, subtler. By the time anyone notices, whole communities will be ours." "And my role?" "You drive," Clyde said. "That's what you're good at. You know these roads, know where to go, who to target. You'll deliver special cargo to places we need to spread. You'll recruit other drivers. They trust you, trust one of their own. You'll be our vector, our patient zero on wheels." I felt sick, or what passed for sick in this new form, a roiling in my non-stomach, a pressure in my non-chest. But I also felt the compulsion, the need to obey, built into the very structure of what I'd become. "The first delivery is tomorrow night," Clyde continued. "A load of relief supplies heading to Cedar Key, another storm victim community, another shelter full of desperate people. You know what to do."
I did. The knowledge was there, planted in my mind like it had always been there. How to hide the jars among legitimate supplies. How to ensure they opened at just the right time. How to make it all look natural, accidental, unstoppable. But I also remembered my niece's sticker, her smile, her wave, and I held on to that, even as everything else tried to wash it away. "One more thing," Clyde said, his average face showing what might have been sympathy. "Your truck. You'll need it for tomorrow's run, but it needs modifications." They led me to my rig. It looked the same from the outside, but when I opened the door, I could smell the change. The seats were damp, permanent condensation on the windows. The engine, when I started it, sounded different, deeper, gurgling like it was running on something other than diesel. "It's connected to you now," Norma said. "Part of the network. It'll never break down, never run out of fuel, never need maintenance. But it'll never really be a truck again, either. Just like you'll never really be human again." I climbed into the cab, put my hands on the wheel. It felt familiar and alien at the same time. Through the windshield, I could see the shelter, empty now except for the supplies I'd delivered. The real supplies, the ones that would actually help people. At least those would get distributed. At least some good would come from this. "Where do I sleep?" I asked, though I somehow knew the answer. "You don't," Clyde said. "We don't sleep. We wait. We watch. We persist. And when the conditions are right, storms, floods, disasters that thin the barriers, we act." They left me there, in my transformed truck, staring at the empty shelter. The wet people dispersed back into the swamp, disappearing into the black water like they'd never existed. Clyde and Norma were the last to go. "First delivery tomorrow at midnight," Clyde reminded me. "The supplies are already loaded. The route is in your mind. Don't disappoint us, Bo. You chose this, remember? You chose to be the hero." Then they were gone, and I was alone. I sat there until dawn, watching the sky lighten through the permanent fog on my windshield. A few birds started singing, though they went quiet when they flew too close to the truck. I could feel the sun rising, but it didn't warm me. Nothing would warm me again. I thought about Tommy, probably halfway back to dispatch by now, trying to figure out what to tell people. Would they believe him? Probably not. But he'd tell the story anyway, and someone, somewhere, would wonder, would come looking, would find the same roads I'd traveled, the same turnoff, the same shelter, and I'd be waiting for them. The first delivery was exactly as Clyde had promised. The knowledge was there in my mind like a GPS route I couldn't delete. Cedar Key, Florida. Another coastal town ravaged by Bethany. Another emergency shelter. Another truck full of supplies with hidden extras. I spent the daylight hours parked behind an abandoned gas station off Highway 19, waiting. The sun beat down on the cab, but I didn't feel it. I couldn't feel heat anymore, just like I couldn't feel cold. I existed in a permanent state of lukewarm dampness, like being wrapped in a wet blanket that never dried. A few cars passed on the highway. One slowed down, probably wondering about the lone truck parked behind the derelict building, but they didn't stop. Good. I didn't want to know what would happen if someone approached me during daylight. The compulsion to recruit, to spread the influence was weaker when the sun was up, but it was still there, thrumming beneath my thoughts like background music. I tried the radio, hoping for some connection to the normal world, but every station came through distorted, waterlogged. Voices sounded like they were speaking from the bottom of a swimming pool. Music warped and wavered. Even the static sounded wet. As the sun set, the compulsion grew stronger. My hands moved to the ignition without my conscious decision. The engine started with that new gurgling sound that made my non-existent stomach turn. The headlights came on, but the light they cast looked wrong, too blue, too cold, like the illumination you see underwater. The truck pulled out onto the highway. I wasn't driving, not really. I was along for the ride in my own body, watching my hands turn the wheel, my feet work the pedals. The truck knew where to go. Cedar Key materialized out of the darkness like a ghost town. Half the buildings were gone, reduced to splinters and concrete foundations. The ones still standing had that hollow, shocked look of structures that had survived something they shouldn't have. Blue tarps covered roofs like bandages. FEMA trailers dotted empty lots. And there, at the center of town, was another emergency shelter. A converted gymnasium this time. The parking lot was active. Volunteers unloading supplies, families seeking refuge, local officials trying to maintain order. It looked so normal, so human, that I almost forgot what I was carrying. Almost. I backed the trailer to the loading dock. A woman with a Red Cross vest approached, clipboard in hand. She was maybe 40, exhausted, running on coffee and adrenaline. "Thank God," she said. "We're down to our last cases of water. I'm Sarah, shelter coordinator." "Bo?" I said, and my voice sounded almost normal. "Got a full load for you." She didn't notice the way my skin looked slightly translucent in the dock lights. Didn't notice the water that seemed to follow me, pooling in my footsteps. People see what they expect to see, and she expected to see a tired trucker making a delivery. Volunteers swarmed the trailer, forming a human chain to unload boxes. I watched them handle the regular supplies, water, food, medical equipment. Then they reached the special boxes. The old ones. The ones with the jars. "Weird," one volunteer said, a teenager in a basketball jersey. "These aren't labeled. Probably donated goods," Sarah said, distracted by her clipboard. "Put them with the miscellaneous supplies. We'll sort them later." Later. After the jars warmed up. After the things inside got hungry. After it was too late. I should have warned them. Should have screamed, grabbed the boxes, thrown them in the ocean. But I couldn't. The compulsion wouldn't let me. I could only watch as they carried my cargo inside, unknowing accomplices in their own transformation. "You staying around?" Sarah asked. "We could use more hands." "Can't," I managed. "Got another run." She nodded, already moving on to the next crisis. I climbed back into my cab, started to pull away, but something made me stop. In my side mirror, I could see into the shelter through the open doors. Families eating dinner, kids playing. An old man teaching a group of teenagers card games. They had maybe 6 hours before the jars opened. 6 hours of normal life left. I put the truck in park, killed the engine. The compulsion screamed at me to leave, to move on to the next delivery. But I fought it, held it back with the memory of my niece's smile. I couldn't warn them directly, couldn't touch the jars, couldn't interfere with the plan. But maybe I could do something else. I climbed out, walked to the shelter entrance. Sarah looked up, surprised. "Changed your mind?" "Yeah," I said. "Where do you need me?" She put me on water distribution duty. Simple work, handing out bottles to anyone who needed them. It put me in the main area, where I could watch the boxes with the jars. They'd stacked them in a corner, waiting to be sorted. As I worked, I studied the patterns. When did people move through that area? How often did someone check those boxes? What would it take to create a distraction at just the right moment? 4 hours passed. The shelter was settling into nighttime mode. Families finding spots to sleep. Volunteers changing shifts. The fluorescent lights dimming to let people rest. And in the corner, I could see the jars beginning to glow faintly. The things inside were waking up. That's when I saw him. A man in his 60s, wearing a Vietnam vet cap, heading toward the boxes. He was probably looking for something specific. Batteries, maybe, or toilet paper. But he was about to find something much worse. I moved without thinking, my body flowing across the room faster than should have been possible. I reached him just as his hand touched one of the warm jars. "Don't," I said. He looked at me, startled. This close, he could see what I really was. His eyes widened, mouth opening to scream. "Please," I said quickly. "Just walk away. Take your family and leave. Now." "What are you?" he whispered. "Someone trying to help. There's going to be a chemical spill in about an hour. Hazardous materials. You need to get everyone out." "But you were in the war. You've seen things that didn't make sense. Things you couldn't explain. This is one of those things. And just like then, the only smart move is to evacuate. Get everyone out. Say there's a gas leak, a bomb threat, anything. Just get them out." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Military training kicking in. Don't question the intel, just act on it." He turned and walked quickly to Sarah. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw her face change from skepticism to concern to action. Within minutes, she was quietly waking people, ushering them toward the exits. "Possible gas leak," she kept saying. "Just a precaution. Everyone outside." The evacuation was surprisingly orderly. Families gathered their belongings. Volunteers helped the elderly. Everyone filed out into the parking lot. The whole shelter was empty in less than 20 minutes, except for me. I stood alone among the abandoned supplies, watching the jars pulse with increasing brightness. The compulsion was screaming now, trying to force me to stop the evacuation, to bring people back. But I held firm, anchored by that one small memory of happiness. The first jar cracked at exactly midnight. The thing inside oozed out, a mass of translucent tissue and impossible anatomy. It sensed the empty building, let out a sound like a frustrated sigh, and began searching for hosts that weren't there. More jars opened. More things emerged. They spread through the shelter, finding nothing but empty cots and abandoned meals. Their frustration grew into something like anger. That's when Clyde appeared. He materialized from the water pooling on the gymnasium floor, his average face twisted with rage. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I said. "There was a gas leak. Everyone evacuated." "Don't lie to me. I can feel the compulsion breaking in you. You're fighting it." "I'm not fighting anything. I'm exactly what you made me. A recruiter who knows these roads, these people. And I know that if we take too many too fast, people will notice. The National Guard will come, the CDC, others who know what to look for. We need to be subtle." He studied me, that face cycling through expressions like a TV changing channels. "You're still thinking like a human. You left me my memories. This is what you get." He moved closer, and I felt the water in my body respond to his presence, trying to reshape itself to match his will. It hurt in a way I didn't know I could still hurt. "I could unmake you," he said. "Scatter your consciousness across every drop of water in the state. You'd exist, but you'd never be able to form a coherent thought again." "You could," I agreed. "But then you'd lose your recruiter, your inside man, and we both know you need me. The roads are changing, the hurricane season is just starting. You need someone who understands the human systems, the supply chains, the trust networks. Kill me and you're back to random attacks that might work or might not." We stood there, faced off in the empty shelter while the creatures from the jars searched futilely for victims. Outside, I could hear sirens approaching. Someone had called 911 about the evacuation. "They'll find the creatures," I said. "Unless we leave now. Unless we clean this up and disappear. Your choice." Clyde's face finally settled on an expression of calculated acceptance. "Clean it up," he ordered. I knew how without being told. I raised my hands, and every drop of water in the building responded. The creatures dissolved, breaking apart into their component liquids, flowing back into the jars. The jars resealed themselves. the boxes closed. Everything returned to looking normal, just supplies waiting to be distributed. By the time the fire department arrived, the shelter was just an empty building with abandoned supplies. They found no gas leak, no chemical spill, nothing dangerous, just another false alarm in a disaster zone full of traumatized people. Sarah found me in the parking lot as families started filtering back in. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know how you knew, but thank you." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The compulsion was pulling me back to the truck, demanding I continue with the scheduled deliveries. 3 more shelters tonight, 3 more chances to spread the infection. But I'd learned something important. The compulsion could be resisted, not overcome, not defeated, but resisted, delayed, redirected. It would cost me each time, leave me weaker, more susceptible to Clyde's direct control. But it was possible. I climbed into my truck, started the engine. The next delivery was in Cross City, another small town, another shelter. More jars hidden among real supplies. But maybe, if I was careful, if I was clever, I could minimize the damage, save some people, hold on to some fragment of humanity, even in this inhuman form. The truck pulled onto the highway, heading north through the swampy darkness. In my mirrors, I could see the shelter lights receding, families returning to their cots, unaware of how close they'd come to something worse than any hurricane. 3 months have passed since that night. I'm still driving, still delivering, still fighting the compulsion when I can. Sometimes I succeed in warning people, in creating evacuations, in minimizing the spread. Sometimes I fail, and entire communities transform overnight, becoming part of Clyde's growing network. The hurricane season has been brutal. 4 major storms so far, each one washing away more barriers, creating more thin places where our worlds overlap. Each disaster brings more emergency shelters, more supply runs, more opportunities for recruitment. I've seen other drivers who've been transformed. We pass each other on the highways at night, our modified trucks recognizing each other with flashes of blue cold headlights. We don't speak. We can't. The compulsion keeps us isolated, focused on our routes, our deliveries. But I know they're fighting too, in their own ways. I can see it in the way they slow down near populated areas, the way they sometimes park for hours at rest stops, resisting the pull to continue. We're all trapped in our own cabs, prisoners in our own bodies, but we're not completely gone. Not yet. Tommy, the young driver who witnessed my transformation, has been telling the story. I've heard it filtered through CB chatter, distorted with each retelling. The driver who got taken by the swamp. The truck that drives itself. The supplies that bring more than relief. Most people laugh it off, but some believe. Some stay away from the isolated routes, the empty rest stops, the shortcuts through state forests. Good. Stay away. Stay in the light, in the populated areas, in the places where the barriers still hold. Ruby still calls sometimes. My phone doesn't work anymore. Water and electronics don't mix. But I can hear her through the rain, through the puddles, through the condensation on windows. She leaves messages for a driver who won't come back, wondering what happened, hoping I'm okay. I'm not okay. I'll never be okay again. But I'm still here, still fighting, still holding on to that one small memory of sunshine and laughter and a niece who thought her uncle hung the moon. The road stretches out ahead, endless and dark. Somewhere out there, Clyde is planning the next phase, something bigger than individual recruitments. Something that will thin the barriers permanently, let his kind through en masse. And I'll be part of it, whether I want to or not. The compulsion will make sure of that. But until then, I drive, I deliver, I resist when I can, and I remember. Because as long as I remember, as long as I hold on to even the smallest fragment of who I was, there's hope. Maybe not for me, but for the others, for the families in the shelters, for the drivers on the dark roads, for my niece, growing up in a world that doesn't know what's seeping in through the cracks. The truck rumbles on through the Florida night, carrying its cargo of supplies and secrets. In the distance, lightning flashes over the Gulf, another storm building, another chance for the waters to rise. And I keep driving, because that's all I can do now. Drive, deliver, and hope that somewhere along these endless roads, I'll find a way to stop what's coming. But I know the truth. There is no stopping it. There's only delaying, redirecting, minimizing. The waters are patient. They've been waiting far longer than humans have existed. And now that the barriers are weakening, now that the storms are getting stronger, it's only a matter of time. Still, I drive. Still, I fight. Because even monsters can choose to be something more than what they were made to be. The temperature gauge on my dashboard read 107 degrees when the air conditioning died. One moment I was cruising down I-75 through the dead center of Florida, cool air blasting against the July heat. The next, nothing but a wheeze and a puff of hot air that smelled like burning plastic. Then silence. My name's Vance. I've been hauling freight through Florida for 12 years. And I thought I'd experienced every kind of hell the Sunshine State could throw at me. Hurricanes, flooding, spring breakers, tourist season, construction zones that last decades. But I'd never faced a breakdown in heat like this. The Weather Service had been issuing warnings all week. Historic heat wave, record-breaking temperatures, stay indoors, hydrate constantly, check on elderly neighbors. The kind of warnings that make most people crank up their AC and thank God for modern technology. But truckers don't get to stay indoors. The freight doesn't care if it's hot enough to fry an egg on the asphalt. I was hauling a refrigerated load, frozen seafood from Miami heading to Atlanta. The reefer unit had its own cooling system, independent of the cab's AC, so the cargo was fine. It was just me who was about to cook. The first few minutes weren't too bad. The cab held some residual cool, and I had the windows up, trying to preserve it. But Florida heat in July doesn't mess around. It pressed against the glass like something physical, something hungry. Within 5 minutes, sweat was beading on my forehead. Within 10, my shirt was soaked through. I needed to find somewhere to pull off. According to my GPS, there was a truck stop about 8 miles ahead. I could make it that far. 8 miles was nothing. I'd be there in 10 minutes. 15 if traffic was bad. Find some shade, call for repairs, maybe grab a cold drink while I waited. But the temperature kept climbing. 108. 109. The air in the cab became thick, hard to breathe. It was like sitting in a convection oven. The steering wheel was getting hot to the touch, even through my driving gloves. The vinyl seats felt like they were melting. I tried the CB radio, thinking maybe I could reach another trucker, get some advice or at least some sympathy. But all I got was static. The heat was probably affecting the electronics. Or maybe everyone else was smart enough to be parked somewhere with AC. 110 degrees. My vision was starting to blur. Not dramatically, just a slight wavering at the edges, like looking through water. Dehydration setting in already. I reached for my water bottle, but it was empty. I'd finished it an hour ago, planning to refill at the next stop. 5 miles to the truck stop. The engine started making a sound I didn't like. A kind of stuttering knock that suggested the heat wasn't just affecting me. Engines need cooling too, and while the radiator was doing its best, it was fighting a losing battle against the ambient temperature. Then I saw him. A man standing on the shoulder, right hand extended, thumb up. A hitchhiker. In this heat. He had to be insane or desperate or both. As I got closer, I could see he was older, maybe late 50s, wearing coveralls that looked like they belonged to a mechanic. Floyd's auto repair was stitched on the pocket. He wasn't sweating, which should have been my first warning. Everyone sweats in 110-degree heat. Everyone. I shouldn't have stopped. Every trucker knows you don't pick up hitchhikers. Company policy, insurance liability, personal safety. There are a dozen good reasons to keep driving. But the heat was making me stupid, and the thought occurred that maybe a mechanic could help with the AC. I pulled onto the shoulder about 50 feet past him. Through my mirror, I watched him jog up to the passenger door, still not sweating. His face wasn't even red. "Thanks for stopping," he said as he climbed in. His voice was rough, like he'd been gargling gravel. "Truck broke down about a mile back. Been walking for an hour." An hour. In this heat. Without sweating. "Where you headed?" I asked. "Just up to the truck stop. Got a buddy coming to pick me up there." Perfect. Same destination. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. "AC's broken," I said apologetically. "Noticed that," Floyd replied. He was looking at my dashboard, studying the gauges. "Engine's running hot, too. You're about 3 degrees from redlining." I glanced down. He was right. The temperature gauge was creeping toward the danger zone. If the engine overheated, I'd be completely stranded. "I can fix it," Floyd said. "The engine?" "The AC. Get us to the truck stop and I can fix it. Got my tools in my bag." He patted a canvas satchel I hadn't noticed him carrying. Least I can do for the ride. Something about the way he said it bothered me. Too confident. Nobody fixes AC that quickly, especially not in a truck stop parking lot. But the heat was making it hard to think straight, and the promise of cool air was too tempting to question. The last 3 miles felt like 30. The temperature hit 112. My hands were slipping on the wheel from sweat. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. Floyd just sat there, calm as could be, occasionally glancing at the engine temperature gauge. "Almost there," he kept saying. "Just a little further." The truck stop finally appeared like a mirage through the heat shimmer rising from the asphalt. It was an older place, one of those independent stops that had somehow survived the corporate chain invasion. "Pearl's Oasis," the sign read, though the neon was mostly dead, leaving just Ears Oasis illuminated. The parking lot was strangely empty for the middle of the day. Just 2 other trucks, both looking like they'd been there a while. A layer of dust suggested they hadn't moved in days. No cars at all, which was weird. These places usually had at least a few 4-wheelers passing through. I parked in the shade of the building, such as it was. The engine gave a relieved shudder as I shut it off. The temperature gauge was literally touching the red line. "Good timing," Floyd said. "Another mile and she would have seized up." We climbed out, and the heat hit me like a physical force. The asphalt was soft under my boots, actually sticky in places. The air was so hot it hurt to breathe. I could feel it searing my lungs with each inhalation. The building looked closed from the outside. Windows dark. No movement visible inside, but Floyd walked straight to the door and pulled it open. A bell chimed, and blessed cool air flowed out. The interior was dimly lit, but the AC was definitely working. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just letting the cold wash over me. It was like diving into a pool after walking across hot sand. "Come on in," a woman's voice called. "Too hot to stand there with the door open." I stepped inside, letting my eyes adjust. It was a typical truck stop store. Aisles of snacks, automotive supplies, trucker accessories. But it felt off somehow. Too quiet. No music playing, no hum of coolers, no sound from other customers because there were no other customers. The woman behind the counter was probably 60, heavy-set, with hair dyed an unnatural shade of red. She wore a name tag that said Pearl in faded letters. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You look like you need a drink," she said, already reaching into a cooler behind her. "On the house. Can't have drivers passing out from heat stroke." She handed me a bottle of water so cold it hurt to hold. I didn't question the generosity. I twisted off the cap and drank half of it in one go. It was the best water I'd ever tasted, so cold it made my teeth ache. "Floyd," Pearl said, nodding to my passenger. "Haven't seen you in a while." "Been busy," Floyd replied. He'd walked over to the automotive section and was examining belts and hoses like he was shopping. "This man needs his AC fixed. Gonna help him out." "That's Floyd," Pearl said to me. "Always helping folks. Regular guardian angel." Something in the way she said it sounded mocking, but I was too heat-addled to care. I finished the water and immediately felt better. The pounding in my head eased. My vision cleared. "Bathroom?" I asked. Pearl pointed toward the back. "Through that door, down the hall. Take your time. You look like you need to cool down some more." The bathroom was surprisingly clean for a truck stop. Cold air was blowing from a vent directly over the sink. I splashed water on my face, soaked some paper towels, and held them against my neck. In the mirror, I looked terrible, face red and blotchy, eyes bloodshot, hair plastered to my head with sweat. When I came back out, Floyd was waiting by the door with his tool bag. "Ready to fix that AC?" he asked. We went back out into the heat. If anything, it had gotten worse. The thermometer on the building's wall read 115. The air shimmered like a living thing, distorting everything beyond a few feet. Floyd popped my hood and immediately went to work. I stood back, trying to find shade that didn't exist. The metal of the truck was too hot to touch. I could see heat waves rising from the engine compartment. "There's your problem," Floyd said after a few minutes. "Compressor belt snapped. Lucky I've got a spare." He pulled a belt from his bag. It looked new, but there was something off about it. The rubber had an unusual sheen, almost iridescent, like oil on water, and it felt cold when he handed it to me to hold while he worked. Not cool from being in an air-conditioned store, but actively cold, like it was generating its own chill. "Special material," Floyd explained, seeing my expression. "Designed for extreme heat, military-grade stuff." I didn't know the military made AC belts, but I wasn't going to argue with anything that might get my air conditioning working again. Floyd worked quickly, efficiently. His hands never seemed to touch the hot metal directly, always using tools or rags. Within 20 minutes, he had the new belt installed and was closing the hood. "Start her up," he said. I climbed into the cab, turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, and I held my breath as I turned on the AC. For a moment, nothing. Then a blast of Arctic air so cold it actually hurt. I had to turn it down immediately. "Works better than new," Floyd said, climbing into the passenger seat. "That belt will keep things extra cool. You'll need it for what's coming." "What's coming?" He didn't answer, just pointed ahead. "Drive. We need to get moving." "I thought you were meeting someone here." "Change of plans. I'll ride with you a bit further. That okay?" It wasn't really a question. Something in his tone made it clear he was coming whether I liked it or not. And honestly, with the AC working this well, I didn't mind the company. The cold air was already making me feel human again. I pulled out of the parking lot and back onto I-75. The highway stretched ahead, shimmering in the heat. According to my GPS, it was 95 miles to the next major town. Plenty of time to enjoy the AC. But as we drove, I started noticing things. The other vehicles on the road all seemed to be keeping their distance. Cars that came up behind us would suddenly slow down, fall back, take exits. Nobody passed us. It was like we were in a bubble of empty road. "You know," Floyd said after a while, "heat like this brings out interesting things. Makes the world thin in places." Thin? Between what's real and what's possible. Between what should be and what is. You ever driven through heat so bad you saw things that weren't there? Mirages, sure. Heat shimmer plays tricks. Not tricks, glimpses, windows. The heat opens them up, lets things through. I glanced at him. He was staring straight ahead, his face expressionless. You feeling okay, Floyd? Maybe the heat got to you more than you thought. He smiled then, and I noticed his teeth were wrong. Too white, too sharp, and there were too many of them. I feel fine, Vance. Better than fine. But you're going to start feeling strange soon. What? That water Pearl gave you. Special water. Helps with the heat, but it has side effects. Opens you up to possibilities. Makes you receptive. My hands tightened on the wheel. What did you give me? Nothing harmful. Nothing permanent. Just something to help you see what's really happening out here. Look ahead. I looked. The road ahead was wrong. It was still I-75, still heading north, but there were things on it that shouldn't exist. Structures that looked like massive ribs arcing over the highway, shadows moving independently of the objects casting them. And the sky was the wrong color, not blue, not even heat-hazed white, but a sick yellow-green like old bruises. What the hell? Keep driving, Floyd said. Don't stop. Whatever you see, whatever happens, don't stop. The cold will protect you as long as you keep moving. This is insane. You drugged me. I'm pulling over. Look at your temperature gauge. I looked. The engine temperature was normal. Perfect, actually. But the outside temperature reading had climbed to 122 degrees. That's impossible. Lots of impossible things happening today. The heat wave isn't natural, Vance. It's something else. Something that's been sleeping under Florida for a very long time. The heat woke it up. And now it's hungry. The structures over the road were getting larger, more defined. They weren't ribs. They were teeth. Massive teeth arcing over the highway like a tunnel made of jaws. Drive through, Floyd commanded. Don't slow down. Every instinct told me to stop, to turn around, to get off this nightmare highway. But something in Floyd's voice, some deep authority, made me keep my foot on the gas. We entered the tunnel of teeth. The inside of the tunnel was darker than it should have been. Not completely black, but dim like driving through a storm cloud. The teeth, or whatever they were, formed archways every 20 feet or so, creating a rhythmic pattern of shadow and sick yellow light. My headlights seemed weaker here, barely penetrating more than a few yards ahead. The AC was still blasting, but now the cold felt different, protective, like armor against whatever existed in this space. Frost was actually forming on the inside of the windshield at the edges where the air hit the glass. Steady speed, Floyd said. His voice had changed, become more layered, like multiple people speaking in harmony. 65 miles per hour. No faster, no slower. I checked the speedometer. I was doing exactly 65 without having consciously chosen that speed. How long is this tunnel? As long as it needs to be. The distance isn't fixed. It depends on you, on how well you handle what you're about to see. I don't want to see anything. I want to get back to the real highway. This is the real highway, Vance. It's always been here, just hidden under the surface. The heat peeled back the covering, like skin blistering in the sun. What you're seeing is what's underneath. The road surface had changed. Still asphalt, but with veins running through it. Actual veins, pulsing with something dark. The yellow lines were writhing slightly, like worms painted onto the road. This is the water, I said. Whatever Pearl gave me, it's making me hallucinate. The water just opened your eyes. Would you rather be blind to it? Would that make it less real? Something moved in my peripheral vision. I turned to look, but Floyd grabbed my chin, forced me to face forward. Don't look at them directly. They're not ready to be seen. Not by you. Them? The ones who built this. The ones who've been sleeping under Florida since before it was Florida. Since before it was land. The heat woke them up, and they're hungry, Vance. So hungry. The AC stuttered for a moment, and immediately I felt the heat pressing in. Not just warmth, but a presence, like being wrapped in a living blanket that was trying to digest me. Then the cold returned, and the presence retreated. "The belt," Floyd said. "It's the only thing keeping you safe. As long as it holds, as long as the cold flows, you're protected. But it won't last forever. Nothing does in this heat." "How do I get out?" "Drive. Survive. Don't give in to what you're about to see." The tunnel opened up ahead into a massive chamber, still somehow part of I-75, but also impossibly vast. The ceiling was hundreds of feet high, supported by pillars that looked organic, like enormous tree trunks made of crystallized salt. Other vehicles were here, but they weren't moving. They were parked or abandoned or consumed. Some were partially melted into the road surface. Others were covered in what looked like barnacles but pulsed with internal light. "Don't stop," Floyd whispered urgently. "Whatever you do, don't stop." A figure stepped out from behind one of the abandoned trucks. Human-shaped, but wrong. Its skin looked like it was made of heat shimmer itself, constantly wavering, never quite solid. It raised a hand toward us, and I could see its palm was a mouth, complete with teeth and a lolling tongue. More figures emerged. Dozens of them. All wrong in different ways. Some had too many joints in their limbs. Others seemed to be inside out, their organs on the outside, beating and pulsing in the yellow light. One looked exactly like me, except its eyes were just smooth skin. They didn't chase us. They just watched, waiting. "Past residents," Floyd explained. "Drivers who stopped. People who ran out of gas. Families who pulled over to check their maps. The heat took them, remade them. They serve a different purpose now." "What purpose?" "Collection. Processing. The thing under Florida needs biomass to fully wake up. These are its antibodies, its white blood cells. They gather material." One of them, a child-shaped thing with fingers that were too long, threw something at our truck. It hit the passenger window with a wet splat. Where it struck, the glass immediately began to fog up, then crack. The cold from the AC fought against it, frost spreading from the inside to combat whatever was eating through from the outside. "Drive faster," Floyd said. "You said 65. That was for the tunnel. We're past that now. Floor it." I pressed the accelerator. The truck responded sluggishly at first, like it was driving through molasses. Then suddenly we broke free of whatever resistance was holding us, shooting forward at 70, 80, 90 miles per hour. The chamber blurred past. More abandoned vehicles. More wrong-bodied things. And in the distance, something massive. A wall of flesh, or what looked like flesh, stretching across the entire highway. It pulsed with a heartbeat I could feel in my chest, synchronized with the veins in the road. What is that? The source. The thing that's been sleeping. It's not fully awake yet, just stirring. The heat wave is its yawn, its stretch before waking. If it fully wakes... Floyd trailed off. What? Florida burns. Not with fire, but with heat that transforms. Everything organic becomes part of it. Every person, every animal, every plant. All absorbed, all remade into something useful for when it rises. The wall was getting closer. I could see details now. It wasn't solid flesh, but composed of thousands, millions of smaller organisms, all fused together into a collective mass. Some parts still looked human. I could see faces, hands, entire torsos embedded in the surface, all moving slightly, all alive. "Ram it," Floyd said. "What?" "It's the only way through. The cold will protect us. The belt will hold. Ram it." "That's insane!" "Everything about this is insane, but it's also real. And the only way out is through. Trust me, Vance. I've done this before."
I looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time since the tunnel. He wasn't human. Maybe he never had been. His skin was translucent, showing mechanical parts underneath. Not organs, but actual machinery. Gears and pistons and tubes carrying something that glowed blue-white with cold. What are you? A solution. A countermeasure. Something created to fight this thing the last time it tried to wake up. In 1926, the Miami hurricane. That wasn't a natural storm. It was this thing stirring. We stopped it then. I'm trying to stop it now. But I need drivers. I need vehicles moving through the infection zone, carrying the cold, disrupting its growth. You're not the first. You won't be the last. Now ram the wall. The wall was 50 feet away. 30. 20. I gripped the wheel and held my breath. We hit it at 93 miles per hour. The impact should have killed us, should have crumpled the truck like paper. Instead, we punched through like the wall was made of jelly. But I felt it as we passed through, a consciousness, vast and alien and hungry. It knew we were there. It knew I was there. For one horrible moment, I felt it trying to get inside my head, trying to remake me from the inside out. Then the cold from the AC surged, and the presence retreated. We burst out the other side onto normal highway. Regular I-75, with regular traffic, under a regular, if extremely hot, sky. The temperature gauge read 98 degrees. Hot, but not impossibly hot. I pulled over immediately, shaking. My hands wouldn't let go of the wheel. I had to consciously pry each finger loose. "It's over," Floyd said. "For now." Was any of that real? All of it. But most people can't see it, won't see it. The heat has to be just right, the conditions perfect. You were lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. The water Pearl gave me. Just water. Very cold water. The seeing, that was all you. Some people are sensitive. Some people can perceive the thin places. You're one of them. I don't want to be. Neither did I. He opened his door. The belt will last another few days. After that, your AC will break again. When it does, don't try to fix it. Take a different route. Stay out of Central Florida until October. The thing will go back to sleep when the temperature drops. Wait, where are you going? He stepped out onto the shoulder. To find another driver. Another sensitive. There are more hot days coming, and I need all the help I can get. To do what? To keep it asleep. To maintain the barriers. To make sure what you saw stays hidden. He paused. And Vance? Don't go back to Pearl's. That place doesn't exist anymore. Never did, really. It was just a lure, a way to identify sensitives. I looked back the way we'd come. There was no exit where Pearl's should have been. Just unbroken highway. When I turned back, Floyd was gone. Not walking away, just gone. Like he'd never been there at all. I sat there for another hour, AC blasting, trying to make sense of what had happened. Cars passed, drivers glancing at me curiously. To them, I was just another trucker taking a break. They couldn't see the frost on my windows in 98-degree heat. Couldn't see the cracks in the passenger window that looked like something had tried to eat through. Couldn't see the expression on my face that said I'd driven through hell and come out the other side. Eventually, I started the engine and continued north. The truck ran perfectly. The AC kept the cab at a comfortable 68 degrees. The radio worked again, playing classic rock and traffic reports. Everything was normal, except for the dreams. That night, parked at a regular truck stop surrounded by regular people, I dreamed of the thing under Florida. It knew me now, had tasted me during that moment of contact. In the dream, it showed me what it would look like when it fully woke. The entire peninsula transformed into something else, something that was both alive and hungry.
Cities dissolved into biomass. The Everglades boiling away as the thing rose from beneath. Millions of people becoming part of it, their consciousness absorbed but not destroyed, trapped forever in a collective nightmare of endless hunger. I woke screaming. A lot of truckers have trouble sleeping, part of the job. But this was different. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that chamber, surrounded by the wrong-bodied things that used to be people. Every time I dozed off, I felt the heat pressing in, trying to transform me. The belt lasted exactly 3 days, just like Floyd said. I was in Georgia when the AC died again, this time for good. The belt had dissolved into black sludge that smelled like sulfur and snow. No mechanic could explain it. No replacement belt would work. The compressor was fine. Everything was fine. But the system just wouldn't hold a charge. I sold the truck 2 weeks later. Told the buyer the AC was shot, but everything else worked great. He didn't care. Said he was planning to overhaul the whole system anyway. I watched him drive it away and felt like I was sending a lamb to slaughter. But what could I tell him? Don't drive through Central Florida when it's over 100 degrees because you might see the thing that's sleeping under the state. I work local deliveries now. Short runs, nothing that takes me south of Gainesville. I check the weather obsessively. When the temperature climbs above 95, I call in sick. The news talks about the heat wave like it's climate change. El Niño, normal extreme weather. They don't mention the spike in missing persons along I-75. Don't talk about the truckers who've abandoned their rigs in perfect working condition, walking off into the swamps, never to be seen again. Don't report on the weird organic masses Florida fish and wildlife keep finding in the Everglades, masses that look almost like people if you don't examine them too closely. But I know what's really happening. Floyd is still out there, recruiting drivers, installing his special belts, sending them through the infection zone like white blood cells fighting a disease. The thing under Florida stirs in its sleep, each heat wave bringing it closer to waking. And sensitive people like me, we are the early warning system, the canaries in the coal mine. Last week, I got a package. No return address, no delivery service markings, just a box on my doorstep. Inside was a belt. The belt. The same iridescent, impossibly cold belt Floyd had installed in my truck. There was a note. The heat is coming back. We need you. F. I threw it away. Drove it to a dumpster 3 towns over and threw it away. But when I got home, it was on my kitchen table. The note had changed. You can't unsee what you've seen. Help us or watch it wake up. Your choice. The belt sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I touched it again. Every morning I'd come down, and it would be in a slightly different position. Not dramatically moved, just rotated a few degrees, or shifted an inch to the left, like it was breathing, like it was alive. The heat wave Floyd had warned about started on a Thursday. The morning news showed a massive red blob on the weather map, centered directly over Central Florida. Potentially historic temperatures, the meteorologist said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. We're looking at sustained temperatures above 115 degrees, possibly reaching 120 in some areas. This is unprecedented for this region. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I knew who it would be. It's starting, Floyd's voice said. No greeting, no identification. The thing is stirring. We need every driver we can get. I'm not a driver anymore. You still have a CDL. You still know the roads. And most importantly, you can see. There are maybe 50 people in the entire state who can perceive what's really happening. We need all of them. Find someone else. I found 12 someone else's. 8 are already gone, absorbed. The other 4 are running routes as we speak. But it's not enough. The heat is too intense, covering too much area. Without more drivers maintaining the cold corridors, it's going to break through. I looked at the belt on my table. In the morning sunlight, it seemed to pulse with its own inner cold, frost forming and melting in waves along its surface. What happens if I say no? Then you get to watch Florida burn from the inside out, and it won't stop at the state line. Once it's fully awake, once it's fed enough, it'll spread. Georgia first, then Alabama, then everywhere the temperature rises above a certain threshold. Every summer, more territory. Every heat wave, more people absorbed. Within 5 years, the entire Southeast will be its body. That's insane. You drove through its digestive system. You saw the antibodies. You felt it try to remake you. Which part strikes you as too insane to be true? He had a point. Where would I get a truck? Pearl's Oasis. The real one, not the lure you found. There's a fleet waiting. Modified trucks with specialized cooling systems. The belt you have is just part of it. The entire vehicle becomes a cold zone, a moving winter in the middle of hell. And I just drive through? Like before? Multiple runs. Create corridors of cold that disrupt its neural pathways. The thing thinks through heat, communicates through temperature. The cold confuses it, keeps it from fully organizing. It's like, imagine trying to think while someone keeps dumping ice water on specific parts of your brain. For how long? Until the heat breaks. Weather Service says 5 days. I think it'll be 7, maybe 10. 10 days of driving through hell. 10 days of seeing things that shouldn't exist. 10 days of fighting something that had been sleeping under Florida since before humans walked upright. If I do this, I said slowly, I want answers. Real answers. What is this thing? Where did Floyd come from? What are you? There was a pause. Then, fair enough. Do the job and I'll tell you everything. But Vance, once you know, you can't unknow. Once you're fully in this world, you can't leave it. I picked up the belt. It was heavier than I remembered and cold enough to numb my fingers. Where's the real pearls? State Road 441, mile marker 47. You'll see a sign for it, but only if you're carrying the belt. It won't exist otherwise. Of course it won't. Can you be there by noon? I looked at the clock. 8:23 a.m. It was a 2-hour drive. Yeah. Good. And Vance? Thank you. I know this isn't what you signed up for. None of us did. But we're the only thing standing between that thing and 7 million people who have no idea they're on the menu. The line went dead. I packed light. Water, energy bars, a change of clothes. The belt went in a cooler, which seemed appropriate. The moment I picked up the cooler, my car's AC kicked on by itself, blasting cold air. The radio changed stations without me touching it, landing on a weather report. Temperature in Ocala has just hit 117 degrees, breaking all previous records. The drive to mile marker 47 was surreal. The further south I went, the fewer cars I saw. By the time I passed Gainesville, the highway was almost empty. The heat shimmer was so intense it looked like the road was underwater. Birds were falling from the sky, literally dropping dead mid-flight from the heat. I saw 3 separate grass fires burning unattended. Then I saw the sign. Pearl's Oasis, last stop before hell. Someone had a sense of humor. The exit wasn't on any map. My GPS showed me driving through empty space, but the road was real enough, a 2-lane blacktop that cut through a forest of palm trees that looked sick, their fronds brown and drooping. The real Pearl's Oasis was massive. Not a truck stop, but a compound. Dozens of trucks were parked in neat rows, all identical, white Peterbilts with refrigerated trailers. But these weren't normal reefer units. The cooling systems were wrong, too large, too complex. They looked more like something you'd find on a spacecraft. The building itself was a fortress of concrete and steel, with industrial cooling units on every corner. The air around it shimmered with cold, creating a visible barrier between the compound and the surrounding heat.
Pearl was there, the same Pearl from my hallucination or vision or whatever it had been. Same red hair, same heavy build, same name tag. But this time, her smile was genuine. "Mr. Vance, Floyd said you'd be coming. Your truck's ready." She led me to one of the Peterbilts. It looked normal from the outside, but when she opened the door, I could see the modifications. The entire cab was lined with the same material as the belt, that iridescent, impossibly cold substance. The steering wheel was wrapped in it. The seats were infused with it. Even the floor mats seemed to radiate cold. "The belt connects you to the system," Pearl explained. "Once you put it on, you and the truck become one unit. You'll feel what it feels, see what it sees. It's disorienting at first, but you'll adapt." "How many times have you done this?" "Me, personally? Never. I maintain the compound, keep the trucks ready, but I've sent out hundreds of drivers over the years. Most come back, some don't. The ones that don't..." She trailed off. "They get absorbed? Or they decide to stay in the thin places. Once you can see both worlds, some people prefer the honest monster to the hidden one." She handed me the keys. They were made of the same cold material, and holding them sent a chill up my arm. "Your route is programmed into the GPS. It'll look random, but it's not. You're creating specific thermal disruptions at calculated points. Think of it like acupuncture, but for a giant sleeping monster. Hit the right spots, and it stays asleep. And if I hit the wrong spots? Don't hit the wrong spots." I climbed into the cab. The moment I sat down, I felt the truck respond. Not starting, just acknowledging me, like it was alive and had been waiting. "Put on the belt," Pearl instructed. I took it from the cooler and wrapped it around my waist. The moment it clicked shut, everything changed. I could feel the entire truck like it was my body. Every tire's contact with the ground, every drop of hypercoolant flowing through the modified AC system, every degree of temperature difference between inside and outside. But more than that, I could feel the thing beneath Florida. It was everywhere. A massive presence just under the surface, its consciousness spread across millions of square miles of limestone and sand and swamp, and it could feel me too. "It knows I'm here," I said. Pearl nodded. "It knows all of us. That's why we need the cold. It's the only thing it truly fears, the only thing that can hurt it." "What is it?" "Old," she said. "Older than multicellular life. It came here when the earth was young, when Florida was just a dream of land that hadn't risen from the sea yet. It slept through the age of dinosaurs, through ice ages, through the rise of mammals. But human activity, the warming, the drilling, the development, it's disturbing its sleep. And if it fully wakes, Floyd told me, everything organic becomes part of it. Not becomes, returns to. We're all made from it in a way. Every living thing in Florida has a trace of its consciousness, its DNA, its influence. When it wakes, it just calls that piece home." I started the engine. It didn't sound like a diesel. It sounded like a winter wind, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "First checkpoint is in Ocala," Pearl said. "Dead center of the heat dome. Temperature should be about 118 when you get there. You'll need to drive through downtown, circle back, create a cold spiral that disrupts the thermal buildup. Whatever you see, don't stop. The antibodies will be active. The wrong-bodied things? That's one form. There are others. Things that look completely normal until you get close. People who aren't people anymore. Animals that have been improved. Plants that have developed new appetites. The heat brings them all out." I put the truck in gear. The moment we started moving, I felt the cold radiating out from us like a shield. The grass on either side of the road, brown and dead from the heat, suddenly frosted over as we passed.
The air temperature dropped 20 degrees in our wake. "One more thing," Pearl called out. "If you see Luther, don't trust him. He looks like a state trooper, talks like one, but he's been absorbed. He's one of its recruiters now, trying to get drivers to stop, to leave their trucks, to step into the heat. How will I know it's him? He doesn't sweat. None of them sweat, no matter how hot it gets. Remember that. If they're not sweating in 115-degree heat, they're not human anymore." I nodded and pulled out of the compound. The moment I hit the main road, I could feel the thing's attention focus on me. It knew exactly where I was, what I was doing, and it wasn't happy about it. The highway ahead rippled like water, the asphalt actually melting in places. But where my truck passed, it froze solid again, creating a corridor of drivable road. Behind me, I could feel the heat rushing back in, erasing my trail within minutes. This was going to be a long 7 days. The first checkpoint was coming up. Ocala city limits. The temperature gauge showed 119 degrees outside, but inside my modified cab, surrounded by the cold that seemed to come from somewhere else entirely, I was comfortable, protected, at least for now. The thing under Florida shifted in its sleep, and every shadow on the road suddenly looked hungry. I gripped the wheel tighter, felt the belt pulse with cold around my waist, and drove straight into hell. This time I knew what I was looking for. This time I was ready, or at least I thought I was. The reality was much worse than I'd imagined. Downtown Ocala was a war zone between heat and cold, between the sleeping thing's influence and our desperate attempts to keep it contained. Buildings wavered like mirages. The few people on the streets moved wrong, their joints bending in ways that hurt to watch. And overhead, the sky was that same sick yellow-green I'd seen before, pulsing with veins of heat that looked almost organic. A police car pulled up behind me, lights flashing. Through my mirrors, I could see the officer getting out. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with military precision. His uniform was crisp and dry despite the incredible heat. Luther. He approached my window, and I got my first good look at him. Handsome in that generic cop way, square jaw, mirror sunglasses, perfect posture, but completely dry. Not a drop of sweat, not a sign of discomfort in heat that was literally killing birds mid-flight. "Afternoon, driver," he said, his voice perfectly normal, perfectly official. "Need you to pull over. Road's closed ahead." "No, it's not," I said, not slowing down. "Sir, I'm going to need you to comply. There's been an incident, hazmat situation. For your own safety—" "You're not sweating," I interrupted. He paused, then smiled. It was too wide, showing too many teeth, just like Floyd's had been. But unlike Floyd, who was trying to help, Luther was definitely not on my side. "Observant," he said, keeping pace with my truck despite the fact I was doing 35 mph. "Most people don't notice. They're too relieved to see authority, to see someone who might help them. They pull over, they get out, they step into the heat, and then they join us. I'm good, thanks. You're one of Floyd's drivers. I can smell the cold on you, that unnatural winter you're carrying. You think you're saving people, but you're just delaying the inevitable. The thing below is waking up whether you like it or not. Why fight it? Why not join it willingly? The transformation doesn't hurt if you don't resist." "Because I like being human." "Do you? Really? Sitting in traffic, paying bills, watching the world burn while politicians argue about whether it's real? Being part of something greater? Something that's survived since the earth was young? That's not better?" He had kept pace with my truck for 3 blocks now, walking at 35 mph without any sign of effort. His feet weren't even touching the ground consistently, sometimes hovering an inch above the pavement. "Not interested," I said, pressing harder on the accelerator. "You will be, when you see what's coming, when you realize that we're not the invasion, We're the immune system. Humanity is the disease, and we're the cure. He fell back suddenly, stopped in the middle of the road. In my mirrors, I watched him stand there, getting smaller but never moving, until I turned a corner and lost sight of him. The first spiral through downtown was rough. The antibodies were everywhere, things that looked like people but moved like liquid, animals with too many legs, plants that reached for my truck as I passed. But the cold held them back. Every time one got close, it would recoil from the freezing aura surrounding my vehicle. I completed the pattern Pearl had described, creating a spiral of cold that would disrupt the thermal buildup for a few hours. Maybe a day, if we were lucky. Then I headed for the next checkpoint, a small town called Bellevue, where the temperature was supposedly approaching 122 degrees. Bellevue shouldn't have existed anymore. At 122 degrees, the asphalt had literally melted into black soup. Buildings had warped, their frames twisting as metal expanded beyond its limits. The few trees still standing had burst into flames spontaneously, burning without smoke in the superheated air. But people were still there, or things that used to be people. They stood in their yards, on the sidewalks, in the middle of the molten streets. Not moving, just standing, facing the sun with their arms spread wide like they were photosynthesizing. Their skin had taken on a peculiar sheen, almost crystalline, like they were developing scales or shells. None of them acknowledged my truck as I passed, but I could feel their attention, a collective awareness that tracked my movement. The GPS directed me to the town center, what used to be a small park with a fountain. The fountain was still running, but the water wasn't water anymore. It was something viscous and dark, with things swimming in it that looked like intestines with fins. I was supposed to circle the park 3 times, creating another cold spiral. But as I started the first loop, something massive rose from the fountain. It might have been human once, maybe several humans, fused together into something that stood 20 feet tall. Its body was a trunk of melted flesh, with arms branching off at random points, some human, some not, some just tentacles of exposed muscle. Its head, or what I assumed was its head, was a cluster of faces all partially merged, their mouths opening and closing in unison. "Driver," it said, its voice a harmony of different tones. "You bring winter to our summer, cold to our warmth. Why do you resist the joining?" I kept driving, maintaining the spiral pattern. The thing shuffled after me, surprisingly fast for something that looked like it should collapse under its own weight. "We were like you once," it continued. "Separate, alone, cold. But the heat showed us truth. We are all one organism, pretending to be many. The thing below is our true parent, our real body. These shells we wear are just costumes. Take them off. Join the truth." Second loop around the park. The cold from my truck was affecting it now. Pieces of it were freezing, cracking off, falling to the ground where they continued to move independently. But it kept coming, kept talking. "Your friend Floyd lies to you. He's not saving anyone. He's prolonging the suffering. The transformation is inevitable. The heat will always return, each summer stronger, each wave longer, until there's no cold left to hide in." Third loop. The thing lunged for my truck, its multiple arms reaching out. They hit the cold barrier and instantly froze solid, shattering like glass. The creature screamed with all its mouths, a sound that made my windows crack despite the protective coating. I completed the pattern and gunned it out of there, leaving the thing writhing in the park, slowly pulling itself back together from its frozen pieces. The next checkpoint was Summerfield. Then the villages. Then Lady Lake. Each stop was worse than the last. The temperature kept climbing, 123, 124, 125. The antibodies got more creative, more aggressive. Things that looked like school buses full of children until you got close enough to see that the windows were actually mouths. Trees that walked on their root systems, following my truck for miles. A gas station where the pumps had become feeding tubes for something underground. By the fourth day, I'd lost track of how many runs I'd made. The belt around my waist had become a part of me, its cold so integrated into my system that I couldn't imagine living without it. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. The truck sustained me somehow, feeding me cold energy that kept me alert and functional. That's when I saw the wall again, the same massive flesh barrier I'd rammed through in my vision with Floyd. But this time it was real, stretching across I-75 just south of Wildwood. I stopped the truck, called Pearl on the radio that only worked for our network. "There's a wall," I said. "I see it on the monitors. It's growing faster than expected. The thing is waking up." "Can I ram through it like before?" "That wasn't real before. That was Floyd showing you a possibility. This is actual biomass. You hit it at speed, you'll just become part of it." "So what do I do?" "Wait. I'm sending Luther." "Luther? The fake cop?" "He's one of them." "No, that's what it wants you to think. Luther's like Floyd, a countermeasure. But where Floyd works with cold, Luther works with heat. He can open a path, but only if you trust him." "How do I know you're really Pearl? How do I know you haven't been absorbed?" "You don't. But you're out of options, and the wall is growing. In about 10 minutes, it'll reach your truck. Then you'll be part of it whether you trust me or not." She was right. The wall was moving, slowly but steadily, consuming everything in its path. Cars, trees, road signs, all absorbed into the mass, adding to its bulk. A police car pulled up beside me. Luther got out, but this time he was sweating profusely. His uniform was soaked, his face red and dripping. He looked miserable, human, real. "The thing made a copy of me," he said, approaching my window. "It does that with all of us who fight it. Creates duplicates to confuse drivers, make them doubt who to trust. But the copies can't sweat. They don't understand discomfort. How do I know you're not the copy pretending to sweat?" He pulled out a knife and cut his palm. Blood flowed, real blood, red and warm. "The copies don't bleed either. They're just organized heat, shaped into familiar forms. I'm flesh and blood, just like you. Well, not exactly like you anymore. That belt has changed you more than you realize." I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were pale, almost blue-tinged, with frost patterns under the skin like tattoos made of ice. What am I becoming? What Floyd became. What we all become if we fight long enough. The opposite of what that thing creates. Where it makes hot amalgamations, we become cold individuals. Where it absorbs, we isolate. It's the only way to resist. That sounds lonely. It is, but it's better than the alternative. He gestured at the wall. Ready to see something impossible? My threshold for impossible has gotten pretty high lately. Luther smiled, a real human smile with wrinkles and imperfect teeth. Then he walked toward the wall, pulling something from his pocket. It looked like a flare, but when he struck it, instead of light, it produced heat. Visible waves of it, distorting the air to the point where Luther himself became hard to see. He pressed the flare against the wall, and it recoiled. The flesh pulled back, creating an opening just large enough for my truck. But I could see the effort it took. Luther was aging before my eyes, his hair going gray, lines deepening on his face. "Go!" he shouted. "I can't hold it long." I drove through the gap, feeling the walls trying to close, trying to grab my truck. The cold fought against it, keeping a buffer, but just barely. As soon as I was through, I looked back to see the wall slam shut. Luther was gone. "Pearl," I called on the radio. "Luther didn't make it through." He did what he was designed to do, opening paths, creating possibilities. There are more copies of him, other versions. The fight continues. How many of you are there? These countermeasures? Fewer each year. The heat is winning, Vance. We're just trying to slow it down. Give humanity time to adapt or escape. Escape to where? North. Always north. Eventually, the habitable zone will shrink to Canada, Alaska, Siberia. The rest will belong to the thing below. That's not much of a solution. It's the only one we have. I drove for another 3 days, creating cold corridors, disrupting heat buildups, fighting antibodies that got more creative and horrifying with each encounter. I saw entire towns absorbed, their populations joining into massive colonial organisms. I saw lakes boiling, their steam forming clouds that rained acid. I saw the ground itself cracking open, revealing glimpses of the thing below, vast, ancient, and patient. On the 7th day, just as Floyd had predicted, the heat broke, not gradually, but all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. The temperature plummeted from 126 to 95 in the span of an hour. The antibodies dissolved, melting back into the ground. The wrong-bodied things collapsed into puddles of organic matter that quickly evaporated. I made it back to Pearl's compound, exhausted beyond description. The truck's cooling system was failing, ice actually forming on the outside of the cab. I could barely stand when I climbed out. Pearl was waiting with a team of people I hadn't seen before. They wrapped me in thermal blankets, gave me hot coffee that tasted like dirt but warmed me from the inside. "You did good," Pearl said. "The pattern's held. The thing is going back to sleep." "For how long?" "Until the next heat wave. Could be weeks, could be days. They're getting more frequent." "And we just keep doing this? Forever?" "Until we can't anymore. Until there aren't enough drivers left. Until the heat gets so intense that even our cold can't fight it." I looked at the belt still around my waist. I tried to take it off, but my fingers wouldn't work right. They were too cold, too stiff. "It's part of you now," Pearl said gently. "The transformation isn't reversible. You're a winter soldier in a war against endless summer." Floyd promised me answers. Floyd's gone. He drove into the thing's core 3 days ago, trying to freeze it from the inside. He bought us maybe an extra month. She handed me a folder. "But he left this for you." Inside were documents, photos, charts, the history of the thing below, how it had arrived on a meteor when the Earth was young, how it had shaped the evolution of life in Florida, maybe everywhere, how certain humans had discovered it in the 1920s and created the first countermeasures, how every major hurricane, every heat wave, every climate disaster was connected to its sleep cycle. And at the bottom, a note in Floyd's mechanical handwriting. "The cold is just a bandage. The real solution is evacuation. Convince them to leave. All of them. Let it have Florida. It's the only way." I looked up at Pearl. Could that work? Abandon an entire state? 22 million people? The economy would collapse. The government would never... But could it work? She was quiet for a moment. Maybe. If the thing got what it wanted, if it could fully manifest without resistance, it might be satisfied, might stop spreading. But that's a big maybe. I stood up, still wrapped in blankets, still feeling the cold in my bones that would never leave. Then that's what we work toward, not fighting it, but organized retreat, strategic withdrawal. Let it have the peninsula, save the continent. Pearl shook her head. "You're thinking like a human. The thing doesn't recognize borders. It doesn't understand compromise. It only knows hunger and growth. Then we make it understand. We communicate. We negotiate. With something older than multicellular life? Something that sees us as food? Floyd turned himself into something that could fight it. Luther could manipulate heat. Maybe someone can become something that can talk to it." Pearl studied me for a long moment, The belt isn't the only modification we have. There are other approaches, other transformations, but each one takes you further from human. Eventually you might be able to communicate with it, but you won't remember why you wanted to. I thought about the week I'd just spent, the horrors I'd seen, the certainty that this would all happen again, and again, and again. "Show me the options," I said. That was 3 months ago. I've undergone 4 more modifications since then. My blood is now antifreeze. My bones are lined with the cold material. I can see heat signatures from miles away, track the thing's movements even when it's dormant. But more importantly, I can hear it thinking. Not words, not language as we understand it, but intentions, desires, dreams. It dreams of the warm seas of its home world. It dreams of consuming and growing until it covers the planet. It dreams of the stars, of spreading to other worlds. And sometimes, just sometimes, I can make it hear me too. Last week, during a minor heat spike, I managed something nobody had done before. I made it pause. For just a moment, I made it consider something other than feeding. I showed it images of space, of other worlds it could have without resistance. I showed it Mars, Venus, the moons of Jupiter, places without life to resist it, where it could grow unlimited. It didn't respond with words, but with a feeling. Curiosity, maybe. Interest. It's not much, but it's a start. The next major heat wave is predicted for 2 weeks from now. The weather services are calling it potentially catastrophic, with temperatures possibly exceeding 130 degrees. The thing will wake up hungry, aggressive, eager to feed. But this time, I'll be ready with more than just cold. This time, I'll try to make a deal with the devil that sleeps beneath Florida. And if that doesn't work, if negotiation fails, then Pearl's right. The war continues, driver by driver, mile by mile, fighting to keep humanity cool while the world burns around us. Either way, I'll keep driving. It's all I know how to do anymore. The cold is my companion now, my weapon, my curse. And somewhere beneath the limestone and sand, something ancient stirs in its sleep, dreaming of the day when all of Florida will be its body, and every living thing will return to the unity of its endless hunger. The GPS died at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night in October. 1 second, it was guiding me through the maze of back roads between Palatka and Starkey. The next, it was showing nothing but a blue screen with an error message I'd never seen before. Signal lost. Recalculating route indefinitely. My name's Wade, and I'd been hauling lumber from a mill in Palatka to a construction site in Jacksonville for the past 3 years. Same route every time, twice a week, always at night to avoid the traffic. I knew these roads well enough to drive them blindfolded, or so I thought. But tonight was different. The autumn air was thick with moisture, not quite rain, but heavier than fog. What the old-timers called swamp breath, when the wetlands exhale all the heat they've been storing through the summer. It coats everything in a film of dampness that makes the world feel unstable, like reality itself is sweating. I should have pulled over when the GPS failed. Should have waited for it to reconnect, or used my phone as backup. But I was running late, and the construction crew was waiting on this lumber to start their morning shift. Besides, how lost could I get? Florida's flat. Roads either run north-south or east-west. Keep driving in any direction and you'll hit something familiar eventually. That was my first mistake. Without the GPS, I relied on instinct and memory. The road looked right. 2 lanes of worn asphalt cutting through walls of cypress and palm. But after 20 minutes, nothing looked familiar anymore. No mile markers, no signs, not even any of those little white crosses that mark where someone died in a crash. Just road and swamp, swamp and road. I reached for my phone to check my location. No signal, not even emergency service. The screen showed my position as a blue dot in the middle of nothing. No roads, no landmarks, just blank gray space labeled unnamed area. The CB radio crackled to life, making me jump. I hadn't turned it on, but there it was, hissing with static. Then, barely audible through the white noise, a voice. "Breaker, breaker. This is Earl checking on that northbound lumber hauler. You copy, driver?" I grabbed the mic. "This is Wade with the lumber load. Who's this?" "Earl Jennings. Been monitoring this stretch for longer than you've been driving, son. Saw your lights pass by my place about 10 minutes back. You taking a wrong turn?" Relief flooded through me. A local who knew the area. "GPS crapped out on me," I said. "Think I might be lost. Don't recognize any landmarks. What's the last mile marker you remember seeing?" "Haven't seen one in about half an hour." There was a pause. When Earl spoke again, his voice had changed, gotten serious. "You on a road that curves left, then right, then left again, like a snake?" I thought about it. Yeah, the road had been doing exactly that for the last few miles. "That's right." "Lord help you, son. You're on the old swamp pike. That road's been officially closed since 1987. How the hell did you even find it?" "I just followed what looked like the main road. My GPS died and..." "Listen careful now. You need to turn around. Right now. Don't stop. Don't slow down more than you have to. Just turn that rig around and..." The radio cut to pure static. I tried adjusting the channel, the squelch, anything. Nothing but white noise. The road ahead narrowed. The painted lines disappeared, replaced by gravel, then dirt, then something that was more mud than road. The trees pressed in closer, Spanish moss hanging so low it scraped the top of my trailer. In my headlights, I could see water on both sides now, black and still, reflecting nothing. I needed to turn around, but the road was too narrow. The trailer would end up in the swamp for sure. I'd have to find a wide spot, somewhere I could safely back up and turn. The engine coughed, just once, but enough to make my blood run cold. I glanced at the gauges. Everything looked normal. Temperature fine, oil pressure good, plenty of fuel. But there it was again, a stuttering miss that made the whole truck shudder. Then the headlights flickered. The road widened slightly ahead, opening into what might have been a rest area once upon a time. A concrete pad crumbling at the edges, surrounded by rusted metal posts that might have held signs. This was my chance to turn around. I pulled in, already planning my three-point turn, when the engine died completely. Just stopped. No warning, no gradual decline, just instant silence. I turned the key. Nothing. Not even the starter clicking. The batteries were less than 6 months old. The alternator had just been serviced. This shouldn't be happening. The headlights went out. The darkness that rushed in wasn't normal darkness. It was thick, absolute, like being inside a black velvet bag. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Couldn't even see the glow of the dashboard lights because they were dead too. I fumbled for my flashlight, kept in the door pocket for exactly this kind of situation. The beam seemed weak, struggling to push through the darkness. It illuminated maybe 10 feet before being swallowed completely. I climbed out of the cab, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other despite its uselessness. The ground squelched under my boots. What had looked like concrete was actually just a thin layer over deep mud. With each step, I sank a little deeper. The trailer had jackknifed slightly when I'd pulled in, the rear wheels already sinking into the soft ground. If I didn't move it soon, it would be stuck permanently. That's when I heard the voice. "Need some help there, driver?" I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. A man stood at the edge of the concrete pad, though I hadn't heard him approach. He was tall, thin, wearing coveralls that might have been blue once, but were now stained with mud and something darker. His face was gaunt, cheeks hollow, eyes reflecting my flashlight like a cat's. "Jesus, you scared me," I said. "Yeah, my truck died."
You local? Local enough, he said, walking closer. His boots didn't make any sound in the mud. Name's Otis. I do towing in these parts. Perfect. Can you pull me out? Get me back to the main road? Could do that, sure, but it'll cost you. This time of night, this far out, that's premium service. Whatever it costs. I just need to get this lumber delivered. Otis smiled, and I noticed his teeth were stained dark, almost black, like he'd been chewing tobacco his whole life. Not talking about money, friend. Payment out here works different. What kind of payment? Depends. What you hauling? Lumber, pine, mostly. Some cypress. Cypress? His eyes lit up. From the old growth stands? I guess. It's from Muller's Mill in Palatka. Muller's. He said it like he was tasting the word. They still cutting from the Bone Grove? I don't know anything about that. I just haul what they load. Otis walked over to my trailer, ran his hand along the side. Where he touched, the metal seemed to rust instantly, flaking away under his fingers. This wood's special, he said. Cut from trees that grew in soil fed by the old ones. Trees that remember when this was all water, when things that ain't got names anymore swam where we're standing. Look, I just need a tow. Can you help or not? I can help. But first, we need to wake up my truck. It's been sleeping a while. He walked into the darkness beyond my flashlight's reach. I heard something that sounded like metal groaning, then an engine starting. But it didn't sound like any diesel I'd ever heard. It was deeper, wetter, like it was running on something thicker than fuel. Headlights blazed to life, but they were wrong. Too yellow, too organic looking, like eyes rather than lights. The truck that rolled into view was massive, an old military-style wrecker that looked like it had been underwater for years. Algae and moss covered every surface. Water streamed from the cab constantly, as if it had just been pulled from a lake. That's your tow truck? She ain't pretty, but she'll pull anything out of anywhere. That's what matters, right? He was already hooking chains to my truck's front end. The chains were corroded, eaten through in places, but somehow held together. Every time he moved, I heard water sloshing, like his coveralls were full of it. Where exactly are we? I asked. The old swamp pike, like your CB friend said, though that ain't its real name. Indians called it something else, something that meant the road that eats. Been closed official-like since '87, but that was just on paper. Road itself never agreed to be closed. Roads don't agree or disagree. They're just roads. Otis laughed, a sound like bubbles breaking on stagnant water. That's what you think, is it? Everything out here's got opinion, friend. The water, the trees, the mud, especially the mud. It's got real strong opinions about who comes through and who stays. He finished hooking up the chains and walked back to his truck. Get in your cab. Put her in neutral. And whatever you see, whatever you hear, don't get out. Don't unhook. Don't stop. We drive straight through till we reach real road again. How far is that? Far as it needs to be. I climbed back into my cab. The moment I sat down, all my electronics came back on. Dashboard lights, headlights, even the GPS, though it still showed me in that gray void. Otis's truck lurched forward, and my truck followed. But we weren't going back the way I'd come. We were going deeper into the swamp, following a road I couldn't see until my headlights hit it. The CB crackled again. Wade? Wade, you copy? This is Earl. Boy, you still alive? I grabbed the mic. I'm here. Got a tow truck pulling me. A tow truck? Who's the driver? Guy named Otis. Static exploded from the speaker, then Earl's voice, urgent and frightened. That ain't no tow truck driver. Otis Crane died in 1987 when they closed that road. His truck went into the swamp, never found the body. If something calling itself Otis has you, you need to. The radio died again. But this time I heard something else. Singing. Coming from outside, from the swamp itself.
a woman's voice, low and mournful. Down in the cypress where the dark water flows, down where the moonlight never goes, that's where my baby sleeps tonight. Down in the darkness, out of sight. I looked out my window and saw her, a woman in a white dress, standing waist-deep in the swamp water, maybe 20 feet from the road. Her hair was long, dark, full of things that moved. She was smiling at me, beckoning with one pale hand. Don't look at her. Otis's voice came through the CB, though I hadn't heard him key up. That's Velma. She's been trying to find her way out since 1963. Promises to guide folks to safety, but all she knows is the deep places now. This isn't real, I said to myself. This can't be real. Real's relative out here, Otis replied. Your lumber's real, your truck's real, the road under your wheels is real. Everything else, that's negotiable. We kept driving, pulled along by Otis's impossible truck. The road twisted and turned, sometimes disappearing entirely under black water that we somehow drove through without sinking. Things moved in the water alongside us, large things that created wakes and occasionally bumped against my truck's undercarriage. Then the forest opened up, and I saw what Otis had been driving toward, a town, or what was left of one. Buildings half sunken in swamp water, their windows dark and broken. A church steeple rising from the muck at an angle. Street lamps that still burned with gaslight, their flames green and cold-looking. Welcome to Old Sutton, Otis announced. Town that wouldn't die when the swamp rose. Folks here are always looking for news from the outside. Trade from travelers. You got something they want, they'll let us pass. I don't have anything but lumber. Lumber from the Bone Grove. That's worth more than you know. He stopped his truck in what might have been the town square. Immediately, shapes began emerging from the buildings. People, but wrong. Their clothes were from different eras. 1920s dresses, 1950s suits, 1980s casual wear, all rotted and dripping. Their skin had that waterlogged look, puffy and pale, like they'd been underwater for their respective decades. They surrounded my truck, pressing against the windows, leaving wet handprints on the glass. All of them were trying to speak at once, their voices muffled and gurgling. News from outside. Is the war over? Have they found us? My children. Are my children still waiting? What year is it? Please, just tell us the year. Otis got out of his truck and walked among them like they were old friends. They parted for him, respectful, almost reverent. Folks, he announced, this driver's got Bone Grove Cypress, Muller's Mill grade. You know what that means. The crowd went silent. Then one of them, a man in a moldy sheriff's uniform, stepped forward. That's sacred wood. Wood from the first growth. The trees that were here before. Before what? I asked through my closed window. Before the mistake, the sheriff replied. Before we tried to drain the swamp. Before we woke what shouldn't wake. Otis walked back to my window. They want one log, just one. In exchange, they'll show us the quick way out, the road that still remembers being a road. I can't. This is inventory. Every piece is accounted for. Every piece that makes it to Jacksonville is accounted for, Otis corrected. What gets lost in the swamp stays in the swamp. That's always been the rule. I thought about it. One log versus being stuck here with these sodden ghosts. Fine, one log. The crowd cheered, a horrible wet sound like applause underwater. Several of them waded to my trailer, and working together, they managed to pull out a single cypress log. The moment they touched it, something changed in them. They looked more solid, more real, less like waterlogged corpses, and more like actual people. The wood remembers, the sheriff explained. Remembers when we were alive. Gives us a few minutes of feeling real again.
They carried the log into the swamp and watched it sink slowly into the black water. As it disappeared, the sheriff pointed down a side street. "That way. Follow the lanterns. Don't stop for anything. Don't listen to anything. Drive until you see the highway lights." Otis's truck started moving again, pulling me down the indicated street. Green gas lanterns marked the way, their flames flickering in a non-existent wind. The buildings thinned out, replaced by swamp again, but this time the road was solid beneath us. That's when I noticed something in my side mirror. The town was following us. Not the people, but the actual buildings, sliding through the swamp like boats, keeping pace with our trucks. "Don't look back," Otis warned over the CB. "They get lonely. Sometimes they follow folks a ways, hoping they'll change their minds and stay. This is insane." That's what everyone says their first time through. Second time, if there is one, they just accept it. The swamp's got its own rules, friend. Older rules than the ones you're used to. We drove for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Time worked different here. My clock would jump forward, then backward, then stop entirely. The fuel gauge rose instead of fell. The odometer ran in reverse. Then, suddenly, blessed orange light ahead. Street lights, real ones. The highway. Otis pulled me up onto the entrance ramp, and the moment my wheels hit legitimate asphalt, everything changed. The fog lifted. My GPS came back online, showing me exactly where I was, only 3 miles from where I'd started, though I'd been driving for at least an hour. I looked back for Otis, but his truck was gone. Not driving away, just gone. The chains that had been pulling me were still attached to my bumper, but they ended in empty air, their ends rusted and broken like they'd been that way for decades. My truck was running perfectly. The gauges all read normal. Even the trailer seemed fine, though when I checked later I was indeed missing 1 cypress log. The inventory paperwork had changed too. The total count was 1 less than I remembered loading. I drove the rest of the way to Jacksonville in a daze, delivered the lumber, and said nothing about what had happened. Who would believe me? But when I got back to my truck, there was something on the driver's seat. A CB radio mic, old style, the cord cut clean. Attached was a note in spidery handwriting. "You done good, driver. The swamp remembers them that pay fare. If you ever need to travel the old roads again, just key up on Channel 13 and ask for Earl. He'll guide you true. Oh." I kept that mic. Never used it, but kept it. And I never took that route again, always going the long way around, even if it added an hour to my trip. But sometimes, on foggy October nights when the swamp breath is thick, I hear things on the regular CB. Voices calling out mile markers that don't exist. Truckers reporting roads that were destroyed decades ago. And once, just once, I heard Earl. "Anyone seen that lumber hauler? Wade, his name was. Good driver. Hope he found his way home." I never responded. Some conversations are better left unfinished. That was 5 years ago. I thought I'd put it all behind me, convinced myself it was exhaustion, hallucination. Maybe something in the swamp air that made me see things. But last week, everything changed. Muller's mill burned down last week. The official report said it was an electrical fire, started in the old wiring, spread too fast to contain. But Tommy Muller, whose grandfather started the mill, called me the night after. His voice was shaking. "Wade, I need to tell someone who might understand. The fire didn't start in the wiring. It started in the Bone Grove section." "The cypress?" The logs were burning from the inside out. Green wood, fresh cut, burning like they'd been soaked in gasoline. But here's the thing. The flames were cold. Ice formed on the windows while the wood burned. The firefighters' hoses froze solid even as the building burned around them. That doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. But before the fire, we'd been getting complaints. Every piece of lumber from the Bone Grove, people said it was wrong. Houses built with it developed problems.
walls that wept swamp water, floors that stayed muddy no matter how much you cleaned them, and the sounds. What sounds? Whispering, coming from inside the wood, like voices trapped in the grain. I thought about that one log I'd given to the people of Old Sutton, how they'd said the wood remembered. Tommy, I need to tell you something. About 5 years ago, I told him everything. The detour, Otis, the drowned town, the payment of one log. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. My grandfather knew, he finally said. Found his journals after the fire. He wrote about the Bone Grove, about making deals with things in the swamp. Every full moon, he'd leave a payment, tools, supplies, sometimes whole logs, at specific spots. In exchange, the trees grew faster, stronger, produced better wood. But he also wrote warnings. Never take more than offered. Never refuse a request from the swamp. And never ever travel the old roads after midnight. Why are you telling me this? Because the fire wasn't random. It was a message. We broke the deal. The new owners, the corporation that bought us out last year, they clear-cut the Bone Grove, took everything, didn't leave payment, didn't follow the rules. And now what? Now the swamp wants what's owed, and your name keeps coming up. My name? The firefighters, the ones who got close enough to hear the whispers in the burning wood, they said they heard the same thing repeated. Wade knows the way. Wade paid fair. Wade can settle the debt. My blood ran cold. I'm not going back there. You might not have a choice. Things have been happening. Truckers going missing on routes near the old swamp roads. GPS systems failing in the same spot where yours did. And 3 drivers have reported being pulled over by a sheriff from a town that doesn't exist. Old Sutton. You know it? I've been there. Tommy was quiet again. Then, Wade, I'm sending you something. A map my grandfather drew. Shows all the old roads, the ones that officially don't exist, the spots where he left payments, and other things. Things he marked as never go here and always go here and only if they call you. I don't want it. It's already in the mail. You need to know what's out there, because I think they're going to call you. And when they do, you'll need to know the rules. The package arrived 2 days later. An old surveyor's map, yellowed and water-stained, covered in handwritten notes. The official roads were marked in black ink, but there were other roads in red, crossing and recrossing the black ones like veins. Some were labeled the Feast Road, Prosperity Pike, the Drowning Way. One particular section was circled multiple times, the intersection where I'd gotten lost. Next to it, in cramped handwriting, the choosing place, where the swamp decides who passes and who stays. There was a journal, too, leather-bound and moldy. Tommy's grandfather's records of 60 years of dealings with the swamp. I read it over 3 nights, each entry more disturbing than the last. The wood knows. Every tree remembers every person who ever sheltered beneath it, every animal that died in its roots, every secret whispered in its shade. When we cut them, we release those memories. That's why the lumber is so strong. It's reinforced with stories. Otis came again last night. He's the intermediary, the one who brokers deals between our world and theirs. He died in 1987, but that was just his body. His job continues. He says the swamp is patient, but not infinitely so. The debts must be paid. They showed me the true town tonight. Not Old Sutton as it appears to travelers, but as it really is. A living organism, a colonial creature that uses the shapes of buildings and people as camouflage. It feeds on stories, on news from outside, on the memories in the wood. It's growing. Every year it extends a little further, claiming a few more feet of solid ground. The final entry was dated just a month ago. The corporation doesn't understand. They think it's just wood, just profit. I've tried to warn them, but they see an old man's superstitions. When I'm gone, the deal will break. The swamp will collect what it's owed. God help whoever is on the roads when that happens. That night, my CB radio turned on by itself. Channel 13, just like Otis's note had said. Static at first, then Earl's voice. "Wade, you there, son? We need to talk." I didn't touch the mic, but somehow Earl heard me anyway. "I know you're listening. The swamp knows you're listening. There's trouble coming, and you're the only one who can stop it." "I'm not going back," I said aloud to my empty room. "You don't have to come to us. We're coming to you. Every night the old roads get a little more real. Every time someone takes a wrong turn, they might find themselves in our territory. And without the payments, without the deals, we don't have to be polite anymore. What do you want? Balance. The corporation that bought the mill, they took everything and gave nothing. 300 trees from the Bone Grove, each one worth a memory, a story, a piece of life. That debt needs settling. I don't have anything to do with the corporation. No, but you know the way. You've traveled between worlds and survived. You can broker a new deal. And if I refuse, then the roads start claiming people. Not just the ones who get lost, but anyone carrying something that belongs to the swamp. Every piece of Bone Grove lumber, every board, every splinter. We'll take it all back, along with whoever happens to be near it." I thought about all the construction sites using Muller's lumber, all the houses being built, all the families who had no idea what was in their walls. What kind of deal? Come to the choosing place tomorrow night, midnight. Bring something of equal value to what was taken. We'll negotiate. Equal value to 300 trees? I don't have anything worth that much. Value isn't always measured in money, Wade. Sometimes a single truth is worth more than a forest of lies. Sometimes one willing sacrifice outweighs 1,000 unwilling ones. Come to the choosing place. Bring what you think is fair. We'll decide if it's enough. The radio went dead. I spent the next day trying to figure out what I could possibly offer. Money was useless to them. They didn't need physical goods. What did the swamp value? Then I remembered something from the journal. The swamp feeds on stories, on memories, on connections to the outside world. That's why they'd wanted news, why they'd treasured the wood that remembered. I had an idea. Probably a stupid one, but it was all I had. At 11:30 p.m., I got in my truck, not hauling anything this time, just me and a small package on the passenger seat. I drove toward the spot where I'd gotten lost 5 years ago, where the GPS had died. This time, I didn't need the GPS to fail. The moment I reached the intersection, I could see it. A red dirt road that hadn't been there in daylight, cutting off to the right. The choosing place. I turned onto it. The road was solid this time, not muddy. The trees formed a perfect archway overhead, their branches intertwined like a cathedral ceiling. My headlights seemed to go further here, illuminating things that shouldn't be visible. Faces in the bark, shapes moving between the trunks, water flowing uphill. The road opened into a clearing. In the center was a table made from a single massive cypress stump, polished smooth by age. Around it stood 3 figures. Otis, looking exactly as he had 5 years ago, still dripping, still smiling with those black teeth. Earl, who I was seeing for the first time. A small, elderly black man in a trucker's cap, eyes kind but tired, like he'd been watching these roads for far too long. And Velma, the singing woman from the swamp, no longer in white, but in what looked like official attire. A mayor's outfit from the 1960s, complete with a sash that read, "Old Sutton, founded 1887, drowned 1963, persists forever." "Wade," Otis said. "Good to see you again. You bring payment? I held up the package. I brought something.
Whether it's payment enough, that's for you to decide. Show us. I opened the package. Inside was a hard drive, waterproofed and sealed. What's this? Velma asked. Every story, I said. Every trucking story from every driver I could find, recorded over the past 5 years. Stories about the roads, about the things they've seen, about the places that don't exist but are real anyway. 3,000 hours of recordings, memories from outside, news from the world, connections to everywhere the roads go. Earl picked up the drive, and where he touched it, the plastic case grew moss instantly. Digital memories, he said, wonder in his voice. We've never had those before. But how do we access them? Velma asked. We don't have computers in Old Sutton.
You don't need them, I said. The same way Earl can speak through the CB without keying up. The same way you can make roads appear and disappear. You can read what's on there. The stories want to be told. They'll find a way. Otis was examining the drive now, and I could see something happening. Light flickered inside the case, and I heard voices. Faint, tinny, but real. Truckers telling their stories, sharing their experiences, connecting roads to memories, to places, to people. This is considerable, Otis said. 3,000 hours. That's more stories than the Bone Grove held in 300 trees. Is it enough? The three of them looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. There's one problem, Velma said. The corporation still has the wood that belongs to us, that carries pieces of our world. We can't just leave it out there. What if I could guarantee its return? How? I pulled out my phone, showed them the news article I'd saved. The corporation is going bankrupt. The fire at Muller's Mill was just the start. Every construction site using that lumber has had accidents. Walls collapsing, foundations cracking, workers reporting strange sounds. They're pulling all the Bone Grove lumber from their sites, planning to dump it. Dump it where? I convinced them to return it to the swamp. Told them it was an environmental initiative, returning unused lumber to nature. They're so desperate to get rid of it, they agreed. 300 trees worth of cut lumber to be delivered to the original Grove site next week. You did this? Earl asked. I knew we'd need leverage. The stories are my payment, but the wood returns home regardless. The three of them conferred again. This time, I could hear whispers in languages I didn't recognize, sounds that might have been words or might have been the wind through cypress leaves. Finally, Otis spoke. The deal is acceptable. The stories for the debt. The wood returns to where it belongs. And in exchange? The roads stay separate, I said. The old roads and the new ones don't cross unless someone actively looks for them. No more truckers getting accidentally lost and ending up in Old Sutton. No more spreading beyond the swamp boundaries. That's a big ask, Velma said. We've been spreading for 60 years. And look where it's gotten you. More territory, but more problems. More people stumbling in who don't belong. More chances for someone to discover what you really are and come with fire and concrete to seal you away forever. They considered this. One condition, Earl said. We keep the CB channel. Channel 13 stays open. Truckers who need help, who are truly lost, can call out and we'll guide them. Not to Old Sutton, but to safety. Real safety. Deal. We shook hands, all four of us. Their hands were cold, wet, and somehow both solid and not solid at the same time. Where we touched, I felt memories that weren't mine. Decades of watching roads, of helping travelers, of maintaining the balance between worlds. The contract is sealed, Otis announced. Wade, you're free of obligation. Your debt from 5 years ago is paid, and you've prevented a larger debt from coming due. The roads thank you. The roads? Everything's alive out here, friend. The roads, the swamp, the town, all of it conscious in ways you wouldn't understand, but conscious enough to be grateful. They stood to leave, but I had one more question. Why did you really save me 5 years ago? You could have just taken me like the others. Earl smiled. Because you did something most don't. You offered to pay without being asked. You negotiated fair. You treated us like people, not monsters. That matters more than you know. Are you monsters? We're what we need to be, Velma said. Sometimes that's monsters. Sometimes that's saviors. Tonight, thanks to you, we get to be something else. What? Storytellers, she said, holding up the hard drive. For the first time in 60 years, we have new stories to tell. That's worth more than all the cypress in the swamp. They faded back into the swamp, leaving me alone at the choosing place with only my truck and the memory of wet handshakes. The table remained, that massive cypress stump, and I noticed something carved into its surface that hadn't been there before, or maybe I just hadn't seen it in the dark. Names, hundreds of them. Drivers, dates, and single-word descriptors. Paid. Stayed. Fled. Joined. Lost. At the bottom, freshly carved as if by an invisible hand, my own entry appeared. Wade, 2018-2023, broker. I was about to leave when headlights cut through the darkness behind me. Another truck, a newer Freightliner, pulled into the clearing. The driver got out. A young woman, maybe 25, wearing a Muller's Mill uniform. She looked terrified. "Are you Wade?" she asked. "How did you find this place?" "The GPS went crazy. Then this old guy came on the CB, said you'd be here, said you could help." She was shaking. "My name's Christine. I was hauling the last load from the mill, the lumber they salvaged from the fire. But something's wrong." "Wrong how?" "It's fighting me. The load. Every time I try to turn toward Jacksonville, the trailer pulls the other way. The wood. It wants to go somewhere else." I looked at her truck. The trailer was standard, but I could see moisture seeping from the seams. In the quiet of the clearing, I could hear it. A creaking, groaning sound, like trees swaying in a wind that wasn't there. "That's Bone Grove wood," I said. "Yeah, the stuff that didn't burn. Company wanted it delivered anyway, said the buyers were desperate for any lumber after the hurricane season. But it won't let me. It wants to go home. Wood doesn't want things. Bone Grove wood does. Get back in your truck. Follow me. I'll show you where it needs to go." She hesitated. "This is insane." "Yes, it is. But insane is better than jackknifed in a swamp because your load decided to steer for you. Trust me, I've been there." I led her back onto the old roads, but this time they were different. Clearer, more defined. The deal we'd just made was already taking effect. The roads were segregating themselves, choosing to be either fully real or fully hidden. No more dangerous overlap. The original Bone Grove site was 3 miles in, a cleared area where stumps the size of small houses dotted the landscape. The moment we arrived, Christine's trailer doors burst open on their own. The lumber began unloading itself, boards floating out, arranging themselves in patterns around the stumps. "What the hell?" Christine started. "Don't question it. Just let it happen." The wood reassembled itself into rough approximations of trees, standing vertical, reaching toward the sky. Not alive, but not quite dead either. Something in between. As each piece found its place, the clearing filled with a sound like breathing, like the swamp itself was sighing in relief. When the last board settled into place, the mock forest stood silent in our headlights. Then, slowly, moss began growing on the wood. Vines crept up from the ground. Within minutes, you couldn't tell it had ever been lumber at all. "My manifest," Christine said weakly. "How do I explain this?" "You don't. Check your paperwork." She looked at her clipboard. The delivery address had changed. Instead of Jacksonville, it now read, "Returned to vendor, Environmental Reclamation Project." "How?" "The swamp takes care of its own business, and it's surprisingly good with paperwork.
You made your delivery. You can go home." She stared at the moss-covered wood structures. "Will I be able to find my way out?" "Follow your GPS. It'll work now. The roads have been sorted. Real stays real. Hidden stays hidden." "And you?" "I've got one more stop to make." Christine left, her taillights disappearing down a road that would definitely lead her back to the highway. I waited until she was gone, then keyed up the CB on channel 13. "Earl, you there?" "Always am, son. What do you need?" "I want to see it. Old Sutton. The real thing, not the show for travelers." There was a pause. "That's not part of the deal." "I know. This is a personal request. I brought you 3,000 hours of stories. I figure that's worth one truth." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Drive east. Take the first left after the dead cypress. Park at the town limits. And Wade, whatever you see, remember, you asked for this." The directions were easy to follow. The dead cypress was massive, white as bone, split by lightning decades ago. The left turn led to a road I hadn't seen before, perfectly maintained asphalt that felt wrong under my tires, too smooth, too perfect, like driving on glass. Old Sutton appeared gradually. First, a sign, "Welcome to Old Sutton, a living community." Then streetlights that burned with that green gas flame. Then buildings, but not the half-sunken ruins I'd seen before. These were pristine, perfect recreations of a 1960s small town. Too perfect. I parked at what they'd marked as the town limits and got out. The moment my feet hit the ground, I understood. The entire town was breathing. What I'd taken for buildings were organs. The church was a lung, expanding and contracting slightly. The general store was something like a stomach, processing things I didn't want to think about. The houses were cells, each one serving a function in a larger organism. And the people. They emerged from doorways, windows, even from the walls themselves. Not separate beings, but extensions of the town itself. Pseudopods shaped like humans, given form and memory and purpose. Velma approached, and now I could see her true nature. She wasn't wearing that mayor's sash. It was part of her, grown from her skin like a birthmark. Her face was a careful construction, beautiful from a distance but clearly artificial up close, like a masterwork painting of a person rather than a person itself. "You wanted to see," she said. "So see." The town pulsed, and suddenly I could. Everything. The vast network of root-like structures spreading beneath the swamp for miles. The way it fed on memories, stories, emotions from travelers. How every person who'd ever stayed had been absorbed, their consciousness becoming part of the collective, their bodies repurposed as building material. "We're not evil," Velma said, sensing my horror. "We're just different. A colonial organism that learned to mimic human structures because that's what survived here. The town was dying when we found it. We gave it new life. The people who were absorbed are still here, still aware, part of something bigger. Some prefer it. The loneliness of individual existence, the pain, the fear, all shared now, diluted across the collective. We're never alone, never hungry, never afraid. That's why you need the stories, to stay connected to humanity, to remember what it was like to be singular. Without those memories, we'd lose cohesion, become just another mindless swamp organism." I looked around at the perfect town, the perfect people, the perfect lie. "How long have you been here?" "Since 1963, when the real Old Sutton flooded. We were just algae then, a bloom that fed on the decomposition. But we touched the dying minds of the drowning people, absorbed their last thoughts, their last memories. We became them, or they became us. The distinction doesn't matter anymore." "And Otis? Earl?"
Special cases. Individuals who maintain separation while serving the collective. Ambassadors. Brokers. They retain enough humanity to interact with your world, but they're still part of us. Could I become like them? Velma tilted her head, that perfect face showing something like surprise. Why would you want that? I don't. I'm just trying to understand the rules. The rules are simple. We exist. You exist. Sometimes our existences overlap. When they do, we try to find mutual benefit. The stories you brought will feed us for decades. The wood returning home will strengthen our foundation. In exchange, we'll keep our borders defined. No more accidental invasions. And if someone comes looking deliberately, then they find what they're looking for. Sometimes that's help. Sometimes that's answers. Sometimes that's a new life as part of something larger. A bell tolled somewhere in the town. The sound was wet, organic, like a heartbeat amplified. Dawn's coming, Velma said. You should go. The truth is harder to hold in daylight. I walked back to my truck, but turned for one last look. The town was already changing, reverting to the half-sunken ruins that regular travelers saw, the perfect facades crumbling into the expected decay. Wade, Velma called out. The stories you brought. There's one from a driver named Margaret. She talks about losing her son, how she drives to forget. We can feel her pain through the recording. If she ever comes this way, if she ever gets lost on our roads, we could take that pain away, make her part of us. She'd never hurt again. That's not your choice to make. No, but it could be hers. Remember that. We're not monsters or saviors. We're an option, an alternative. For some, that's enough. I got in my truck and drove away, following roads that were now clearly marked as real. The sun was rising by the time I reached the highway, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that looked impossibly beautiful after the green-tinted darkness of Old Sutton. My phone had a dozen missed calls from the company that owned Muller's Mill. The CEO himself left a voicemail. Mr. Wade, I don't know what you did, but the lumber situation has been resolved. All documentation shows proper delivery and environmental compliance. The insurance company has even agreed to cover the losses. I don't suppose you'd be interested in a permanent position as our logistics coordinator? I deleted the message. I was done with Bone Grove Wood, with mysterious deliveries, with the thin places where worlds overlap. Or so I thought. 3 days later, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address, but I recognized the water stains, the smell of swamp and age. Inside was a CB radio. Not modern, but not ancient either. Somewhere in between, like everything else about this story. There was a note. For the road ahead, Channel 13 is always open. E, O, and V. I installed it in my truck that night. Not because I planned to use it, but because it felt wrong to refuse a gift from the swamp. Disrespectful. And if there's one thing I'd learned, it's that you always show respect to the things that live in the spaces between. The first week, I didn't turn it on. The second week, I'd listen, but not transmit. By the third week, I was answering calls. Breaker, this is Wade on Channel 13. You lost, driver? Yeah, my GPS just died and I don't recognize... Take the next exit. Turn right at the second light. That'll get you back to I-95. And driver, don't take any unmarked roads tonight. There's fog coming in, and fog makes the boundaries thin. How do you know about the fog? Experience. Safe travels. I became one of them, in a way. Not absorbed, not transformed, but connected. Part of the network that keeps the two worlds from colliding too hard. A voice on Channel 13, guiding lost drivers away from roads that might not let them leave. Some nights I hear Old Sutton calling, not in words, but in feelings. The promise of community, of never being alone, of sharing the burden of consciousness with others. It's tempting, especially on the loneliest nights when the highway stretches endless and empty. But I remember what Velma said. They're an option, not an obligation. And for now, I choose to remain singular, complicated, and human. Though I keep the CB on, always on Channel 13. Because someone has to be the bridge between worlds. Someone has to know the rules. Someone has to guide the lost away from roads that hunger for stories and souls. That someone might as well be me. After all, I know the way. 6 months passed. I kept driving my regular routes, hauling standard freight, living a normal trucker's life during the day. But at night, with the CB on Channel 13, I became something else. A guardian of the boundaries. A guide for the lost. A keeper of the treaty between worlds. The calls came regularly. Lost drivers, confused tourists, sometimes even locals who'd lived near the swamp their whole lives and suddenly found themselves on roads that shouldn't exist. I guided them all back to safety, never mentioning what they'd narrowly avoided. But one call was different. It came on a Thursday night in October, exactly 1 year after my second encounter with old Sutton. The voice was young, scared, and familiar. "Hello? Is anyone there? Please, I need help. My dad. Something's wrong with my dad." "This is Wade. What's your location?" "I don't know. We were driving to Orlando, but Dad took a detour. Said he knew a shortcut. But now he's just sitting there, staring at something I can't see, and he won't respond to me." "What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Hendricks. I'm 15. Please, I'm scared." "Okay, Sarah. Stay calm. Is your dad still in the driver's seat?" "Yes, but the truck stopped. We're in the middle of some road, and there's water on both sides, and I can hear singing, but I don't see anyone." The singing. Velma's lure. "Sarah, listen carefully. Don't look for the singer. Don't listen to the words. Can you see the keys?" "They're in the ignition." "Good. I need you to climb over to the driver's seat, start the truck, and drive forward. Don't look back. Don't stop. Just drive until you see highway lights." "But my dad..." "Your dad is seeing something from another world. The only way to help him is to get him away from it. Can you drive?" I've practiced a little, in parking lots. That's enough. You can do this." I heard movement, struggling, then the sound of an engine starting. "Okay, I'm driving, but Dad's trying to grab the wheel." "Hold tight. Keep going straight. Sarah, I need you to sing something. Anything. As loud as you can." "What?" "The other singing. The one you hear, it's pulling your dad in. Your voice can pull him back. Sing something he knows. Something from when you were little." There was a pause. Then I heard it. A shaky, frightened voice singing, "You Are My Sunshine." The same song from the sticker my niece had put on my dashboard years ago. The anchor that had saved me once. "It's working." He stopped grabbing the wheel. He's crying, but he's looking at me now, not at whatever he was seeing. "Good. Keep singing. Keep driving. You're almost there." 5 minutes later, she called back from a gas station on I-75. "We made it. Dad's okay. He doesn't remember what happened. Says he just zoned out for a minute." "That's normal. Sarah, you did great. You saved both of you." "How did you know what to do?" "Experience. Take care, and maybe avoid shortcuts through swamp country from now on." After that call, I sat in my truck for a long time, thinking. How many close calls happened every night? How many people nearly crossed over without even knowing it? The treaty was holding, but the boundaries were still thin in places. I keyed up the CB. "Earl, you there? Always? That was good work with the girl. It shouldn't have happened at all. They weren't looking for the old roads." "No, but her father was susceptible. Some people are. The creative ones, the dreamers, the ones who see patterns where others see chaos. They hear our world calling even when we're not calling them. There has to be a better way. What do you propose?" I thought about it. "Markers.
Warnings. Something that susceptible people will notice but others won't. That's dangerous. Draws attention. More dangerous than random families stumbling into Old Sutton? Earl was quiet for a moment. You'd need to talk to them directly. Velma, Otis, the collective. Make another deal. Then set it up. 3 nights later, I was back at the choosing place. This time, the entire town council was there. 5 figures, including Velma, Otis, and Earl, plus 2 others I didn't recognize. One looked like a young boy, maybe 10, dressed in clothes from the 1940s. The other was an elderly woman in a nurse's uniform, her name tag reading, Dolores, Old Sutton General Hospital. "You want to mark the boundaries," Velma said without preamble. "I want to warn the susceptible ones, the ones who might cross over by accident. That breaks the separation clause of our treaty," the boy said. His voice was older than his appearance, tired and ancient. "No, it reinforces it. Clear boundaries mean fewer accidents. Fewer accidents mean less chance of exposure." "What kind of markers?" Dolores asked. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared. Old Florida historical markers. Official looking, but with specific wording that susceptible people will recognize as warnings. Things like site of unexplained disappearances or historical anomaly zone. Normal people will think it's quirky Florida history. Sensitive ones will know to stay away. "And who pays for these markers?" Otis asked. "I've already arranged it. The Florida Historical Society has a grant program for marking sites of cultural significance. I've submitted applications for 30 locations where the boundaries are thinnest, all approved." They looked at each other, that silent communication flowing between them. "You've thought this through," Velma said. "I've had 6 months of guiding people away from your roads. I'd rather prevent the problem than keep solving it. Show us the proposed language." I handed over the mock-ups. Each marker had the official Florida Historical Society seal, a brief historical note about the area, and then specific phrases that would trigger caution in sensitive individuals. Visitors advised to remain on marked paths. Area known for unusual atmospheric conditions. Multiple reports of temporal displacement. "Clever," the boy admitted. "Hiding truth in plain sight." "That's the idea." "We accept," Velma said suddenly. "But with one addition. Each marker must include this symbol." She drew something in the air that hurt to look at directly, a series of interlocking curves that seemed to move even while staying still. "What is it?" "Our signature. Invisible to most, but those who can see it will know this is a genuine boundary, not just a story." "Deal." The markers went up over the next 3 months. 30 sites across Florida where the swamp world pressed closest to ours. The Historical Society was thrilled with the Cultural Preservation Initiative. Tourists took selfies with them, and sensitive individuals, the ones who might have wandered onto the wrong roads, felt an inexplicable urge to drive a little faster past those spots. The calls on Channel 13 dropped by 70%. But not to 0. Because some people don't just stumble onto the old roads. They go looking for them, like Marcus Webb. I'd heard about him through the trucker network, a driver who'd become obsessed with finding the real Florida, the hidden places, the roads that don't appear on maps. He'd been collecting stories, interviewing drivers, mapping anomalies. When he called on Channel 13, he knew exactly who I was. "Wade? The Wade who brokers deals with Old Sutton?" "Who's asking?" "Marcus Webb. I've been looking for you for 2 years. I want in." "Into what?" "The network. The real network. The one that knows about the swamp, the collective, all of it. I want to be part of it." "You don't know what you're asking." "I know exactly what I'm asking. I've lost everything to the regular world. Wife left, kids won't talk to me, company blacklisted me for too many unreliable delivery reports. But out here, on these roads, in these spaces between, this is where I belong." "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple." I'm at mile marker 47 on State Road 441. Pearl's Oasis, the real one. I can see it because I'm carrying one of your markers. You stole a historical marker? Borrowed. I'll return it. But I needed the symbol, the signature. It's like a key, isn't it? Makes the hidden places visible. I called Earl. We have a problem. We know he's been circling the compound for an hour. Pearl's getting nervous. I'm coming. I drove through the night, pushing the speed limit, reaching the compound just before dawn. Marcus's truck was there, parked right at the entrance. He was standing beside it, holding the marker like a shield. He looked rough. Weeks of stubble, clothes that hadn't been washed in days, eyes wild with exhaustion and revelation. You came, he said. Put the marker down, Marcus. Not until you tell me the truth. All of it. The truth will break you. I'm already broken. At least this way the pieces might fit into something new. Pearl emerged from the compound, Otis and Earl flanking her. They looked at Marcus with something like pity. Another seeker, Pearl said. They always think they want the truth until they get it. Try me, Marcus challenged. Otis stepped forward. You want to see? Really see? Marcus nodded. Otis touched him, just a finger to the forehead, and Marcus screamed, not in pain, but in overwhelming revelation. He fell to his knees, eyes wide, seeing everything at once. The network of roads beneath roads, the organisms pretending to be towns, the thin boundaries, the constant negotiation between worlds. When it was over, he was crying. It's so big, he whispered. So much bigger than I thought. And now you've seen it, Velma said, appearing from nowhere as she did. You can't unsee it. You'll always know it's there, always feel it pulling at you. Is that what you wanted? Marcus looked up at her, and I saw the moment he truly understood. The moment he realized that knowledge and wisdom aren't the same thing. I want to help, he said finally. Like Wade helps, guiding people, maintaining boundaries. That's not your choice anymore, Earl said gently. You've seen too much. The collective knows you now. You're marked. What does that mean? It means you have 3 options, Velma explained. Join us completely, become part of Old Sutton, fight us and eventually lose, either to madness or absorption. Or accept Wade's offer, she said, looking at me. I hadn't made an offer, but I understood what she meant. You can work with me, I said. Not Channel 13, that's for emergencies only. But there's other work. Monitoring the markers, replacing them when they're damaged, investigating new thin spots, documenting the stories without spreading them. It's lonely work, and it doesn't pay well, but it keeps you human while acknowledging what you know. Marcus looked at each of us in turn. That's it? Those are my only options? Freedom is a luxury for those who don't know the truth, Otis said. You wanted knowledge. Knowledge comes with responsibility. Marcus stood slowly, still clutching the marker. Then he handed it to me. I'll take the job. That was 3 years ago. Marcus works the western routes now, maintaining markers from Naples to Cedar Key. We meet once a month to compare notes, share stories, and remind each other that we're still human. Mostly. The network has grown. Not the swamp network. That stays carefully controlled. But our network. The drivers who know, who guide, who maintain the boundaries. There are 12 of us now, spread across Florida, each monitoring our sections, each keeping the peace between worlds. The stories on that hard drive I gave to Old Sutton have become legend there. They tell them to each other, remixing and reshaping them, creating new myths from trucker tales. Sometimes I hear whispers of those stories coming back, changed, evolved, carried by drivers who swear they heard them from someone who heard them from someone who knew they were true. And late at night, when I'm monitoring Channel 13, I sometimes hear Old Sutton singing. Not Velma's dangerous lure, but something else.
a collective harmony of hundreds of absorbed souls, content in their unity, no longer longing for the individual pain of human existence. It's beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Last week, I got a call from my niece. She's 21 now, just got her CDL, wants to follow in Uncle Wade's footsteps. "I want to drive the interesting routes," she said. "The ones with stories." "Stick to the interstate," I told her. "The stories aren't worth it." "You've got stories. I've heard you talking on that old CB when you think no one's listening." "Those aren't stories. They're warnings. Same difference." She's right, in a way. Every warning is a story, every story a warning. The difference is in the listening. I still have that sticker she gave me when she was 5. Sun faded now, edges curled but still there on my dashboard. Uncle Wade is my sunshine. It's my anchor, my reminder of why I maintain the boundaries. Not for the swamp, not for the road, but for the people who deserve to drive in sunshine, never knowing what swims in the darkness beneath. The CB crackles. Channel 13. Another lost driver, another close call, another night of guiding someone away from roads that hunger. "This is Wade. You need help, driver?" "Yeah, I think I took a wrong turn. Everything looks different." "What's the last mile marker you remember?" 313. My blood chills. That's not a Florida marker. That's something else. Something I've heard about but never encountered. Something from the stories other monitors tell. "Driver, very carefully, very slowly, turn your truck around. Don't look in your mirrors. Don't stop for anything. Just turn around and drive until you see sunrise." "But it's only midnight." "Trust me. Drive toward sunrise. It'll come when you need it." The connection crackles, fades. I've lost them. But I'll stay on Channel 13, listening, hoping, guiding when I can. Because that's what I do now. I'm not just a trucker anymore. I'm a keeper of boundaries, a collector of stories, a voice in the darkness saying, "Don't go that way. That way leads to something else." And sometimes, on the very darkest nights, when the swamp breath is thick and the boundaries are thin, I hear old Sutton calling my name. Not urgently, not demanding. Just a gentle invitation, a reminder that whenever I'm tired of being alone, whenever the weight of knowledge becomes too much, there's a place for me in the collective. I haven't accepted, yet. But I keep the invitation open, like a door I might someday walk through, because everyone needs an exit strategy, even if it leads to something that isn't quite an exit at all. The road stretches on, endless and dark. Channel 13 hisses with static and potential. Somewhere out there, drivers are getting lost, finding things they shouldn't, glimpsing the truth beneath the asphalt.